Hey friends, welcome to the Horror Sleep. Almost 90% of you watching aren't subscribed. If you enjoy these true park ranger horror stories, hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It really helps the channel. Oh, and where are you watching from tonight? Let me know in the comments. My name is Jack Halper, and I've been a park ranger in the Wyoming mountain region for 8 years. Here, I've seen things that would cause most people to quit by the end of their first season. Bears entering campgrounds, hikers stranded on cliff edges, cases of hypothermia causing people's fingers to freeze off like icicles. But what happened last February was different. It was something I still can't explain, even with the passage of time, and to be honest, I'm not sure I can explain it. It all started 3 days after the worst snowstorm in a decade. The storm dumped about 1.3 meters of snow on the Roosevelt Peak area and rendered miles of roads and trails impassable. For 72 hours, Casey Vaughn, a volunteer ranger working his second season, and I were stranded in the patrol cabin at Bear Creek Junction. With most of the wood burned and our food nearly gone, we listened to the wind howling to get inside. When the storm finally broke on that third morning, the silence was almost worse than the howling had been. You know that feeling when your ears are ringing after a loud concert? It was like that, except the ringing was just the complete absence of sound. No wind, no animals, nothing. Just this thick, suffocating quiet that pressed down on everything like a wool blanket. Casey was the first one to step outside. He was young, maybe 26, with that eager energy that volunteers always have before the mountains break them down a little. He pushed open the cabin door and immediately sank waist deep into the snowdrift that had piled up against the entrance during the night. I heard him laugh, that nervous kind of laugh people make when they're trying not to panic. "Jesus, Jack," he called back. "We're going to need the snowshoes for this." I grabbed our gear from the storage closet. 2 pairs of bear paw snowshoes, ice axes, emergency shelter kits, and our radios. Mine was clipped to my belt and I tried the call button out of habit. Static. The storm had probably taken out the repeater tower on Summit Ridge. We'd be on our own until we could hike down to the ranger station at Elk Valley, a good 12 miles through fresh powder. The sun was bright that morning, almost painfully bright. It reflected off the snow in a way that made everything look like one continuous white sheet, like someone had erased all the details from the world. You couldn't tell where the ground ended and the sky began. Casey had to put on his goggles within the first 5 minutes, and I wasn't far behind. Our first objective was simple. Check the main trail markers along the Bear Creek Loop. Winter hikers use that route, and after a storm like this, we needed to make sure none of the markers had been buried or damaged. It should have been a routine patrol, maybe 4 hours round trip if the snow wasn't too deep. We started walking at 8:30 in the morning. The temperature was hovering around 15 degrees, and our breath came out in thick clouds that hung in the air for a few seconds before disappearing. Every step crunched loud in that silence. Too loud. It felt wrong somehow, like we were disturbing something that didn't want to be disturbed. About a mile in, Casey spotted something off the trail. At first, I thought it was just a shadow, some trick of the light on the snow, but he stopped and pointed, and I saw it too. A single footprint. Not snowshoe tracks, not animal prints. A bare, human footprint, pressed deep into the snow about 20 yards to our left. I stared at it for a long moment, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The print was fresh. Couldn't have been more than a few hours old based on how clean the edges were. But that didn't make any sense. Nobody could survive out here barefoot, especially not after a blizzard. The temperature had dropped to nearly 10 below zero during the storm. Exposed skin would get frostbite in minutes. "What the hell is that?" Casey's voice had lost that eager edge. Now he just sounded confused and maybe a little scared. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I moved closer to the print, careful not to step on it. It was a left foot, definitely adult-sized, maybe a men's 10 or 11. The impression was deep, like whoever made it was carrying weight or pressing down hard. But here's the thing that made my stomach start to knot up. There was only one print. Just that single left footprint in the middle of an untouched field of snow, no trail leading to it, no other marks leading away from it. "Someone's hurt out here," Casey said. He was already reaching for his radio before remembering it was dead. "We need to find them." I held up a hand to stop him from moving forward. Something about this wasn't right, and I've learned over the years to trust that feeling. The mountains don't play fair, and sometimes the things that look wrong are wrong for a reason. "Hold on," I said. I moved in a slow circle around the footprint, scanning the area. The snow was pristine everywhere else. Not even an animal track broke the surface. How does someone leave one footprint in the middle of nowhere without a trail showing how they got there? Casey was getting impatient. "Jack, if someone's out here injured, every minute counts. We can figure out the weird stuff later." He had a point. Search and rescue training says you don't waste time on questions when there might be a life at stake. But something in my gut was screaming at me to stay put, to not follow that print, to turn around and head back to the cabin. I ignored that feeling. That was my first mistake. "All right," I said finally. "We'll do a quick sweep of the area, 15-minute radius from this spot. But we stay together, and if we don't find anything, we head straight for Elk Valley and report this." Casey nodded, and we split our circle search pattern. I went left, he went right, and we moved in slowly expanding arcs with the footprint at the center. The snow crunched under our snowshoes. The sun climbed higher, and the glare got worse. I kept my eyes on the ground, looking for any sign of a person, any disturbance in the snow, anything at all. Nothing. 15 minutes turned into 20, then 25. Casey called out a few times, his voice echoing strangely in that dead air, but there was never any response. No other footprints appeared. No blood in the snow. No torn clothing snagged on branches. Just that one impossible print sitting there like a question mark carved into the landscape. "This doesn't make sense," Casey said when we met back at the starting point. His face was red from the cold, and I could see the frustration building behind his eyes. "People don't just vanish. There has to be a trail." I looked at that footprint again. Something about it was bothering me, something beyond the obvious wrongness of it being alone out there. The edges were too clean, too perfect. Real footprints in snow usually have some blur to them, some distortion from the foot sliding or the snow compressing unevenly. This one looked almost pressed, like someone had used a stamp. "We're heading to Elk Valley," I said. "Radio this in, get proper search and rescue up here if needed." Casey looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. We turned away from that footprint and started back toward the trail. I marked the GPS coordinates on my handheld unit. Whatever was going on, we'd need to remember exactly where that print was. The hike back to the trail took maybe 10 minutes. The whole time I felt like something was watching us. You know that feeling, right? That prickle on the back of your neck that makes you want to turn around and look, even though you know there's nothing there. I've felt it before out in the wilderness. Usually, it's just a deer or an elk watching from the tree line. Sometimes it's a bear keeping tabs on you from a distance. But this felt different. This felt deliberate. We reached the trail marker and kept moving. The plan was to follow the Bear Creek Loop down to the junction, then take the service road toward Elk Valley. At a good pace, we could make it before dark. I checked my watch. 11:15. Plenty of daylight left. That's when Casey stopped dead in his tracks. "Jack," he said, and his voice had gone quiet. "Jack, look." I followed his gaze. About 50 yards ahead, right in the middle of the trail, there was another footprint. Same left foot. Same impossible isolation. Just sitting there in the snow like it had been waiting for us to find it. My mouth went dry. I felt my heart rate kick up a notch. This wasn't right. This wasn't natural. You don't get two identical footprints that far apart without a connecting trail. It violated every basic rule of how tracks work. "We need to go," I said. "Now." Casey didn't argue this time. We both picked up our pace, moving faster than was probably safe on snowshoes. The print was behind us now, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being herded, that something was guiding us in a specific direction. The forest around us was too quiet. There should have been birds, squirrels, something, but there was nothing. Just that oppressive silence and the crunch of our snowshoes and the sound of our breathing getting faster and more panicked. We walked for another hour. My legs were burning from the effort of moving through deep snow, and my back was starting to ache from the weight of my pack. Casey was breathing hard beside me, his face pale despite the exertion. Neither of us had said much since that second footprint. Then we saw the third one. This time it was off to our right, maybe 30 feet from the trail. Same left foot. Same perfect impression. But this one was different in one crucial way. It was pointing back toward us, like whoever made it had been watching us pass. "Jack?" Casey's voice cracked. "What the fuck is happening?" I didn't have an answer. I'd been a ranger for 8 years, and I'd never seen anything like this. Lost hikers leave trails. Animals leave patterns. But this was something else entirely. Something that followed its own rules. "Keep moving," I said. "Don't look at it, just keep moving." We pushed on. The sun was starting its descent toward the western peaks, and the temperature was dropping. We had maybe 4 hours of good daylight left. 4 hours to cover what should have been a 3-hour hike. The math wasn't working in our favor. Around 3 in the afternoon, we crested a ridge that overlooked the Elk Valley Ranger Station. I could see the building from there, a small brown structure nestled in the valley below. Smoke was rising from its chimney, which meant someone was there. Relief flooded through me. We were almost safe. But then Casey grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in hard even through my jacket. "Jack," he whispered, "the prince." I looked down the slope ahead of us. My stomach dropped. There, stretching down the hillside in a perfect line toward the ranger station, were footprints. Dozens of them. All left foot. All evenly spaced. All pointing down toward the valley like arrows showing us the way. "We're not going down there," I said. "What? Why not?" "Because whatever's making these prints wants us to go down there, and I don't trust anything that's been tracking us for the last 6 hours. Casey looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Jack, that's the ranger station. That's safety. We need to report this. We need help. We need to think." I cut him off. "Something is wrong here, Casey, really wrong. And walking into a trap because it's dressed up as safety is exactly how people die in the mountains." He wanted to argue. I could see it in his face. But he was smart enough to realize I was right. We stood there on that ridge for a long moment, looking down at those impossible footprints leading to the station, and neither of us moved. The sun dipped lower. The shadows grew longer. And somewhere in the forest behind us, I swear I heard something that sounded like footsteps crunching through snow. But when I turned around, there was nothing there. We didn't go down to the ranger station. Instead, I made the call to circle around and approach from the east, staying high on the ridge where we could see the building from multiple angles before committing to a descent. Casey thought I was being paranoid, and maybe I was. But paranoia keeps you alive in the wilderness when things stop making sense. We moved parallel to the valley for about 45 minutes, keeping the station in view. The line of footprints continued down the slope, and from our elevated position, I could see they led right up to the front door of the building. Every single print was identical, evenly spaced, like someone had measured them out with a ruler. "There's smoke from the chimney," Casey pointed out. "Someone's definitely inside." "Yeah," I said. "Question is, who?" The station should have been staffed by Marty Rodriguez, the winter caretaker. Marty was a 20-year veteran, solid as they come. But I'd tried my radio 3 times during our detour, and there'd been nothing but static. If the repeater was down, Marty's radio would be down too. He'd be cut off, same as us. Unless something else had cut him off. I shook my head, trying to clear the thoughts. I was letting this get to me, letting the strangeness of those footprints warp my judgment. There was probably a rational explanation. Maybe some kids from the nearby town had come up before the storm with a fake foot mold, playing a prank. Maybe it was some weird ice formation that just happened to look like prints. Maybe I was overthinking everything because I'd been cooped up in a cabin for 3 days with nothing but canned soup and Casey's terrible jokes. But I didn't believe any of that. Not really. We completed our circle around the station and came down on the eastern side, where the tree line provided cover almost all the way to the building. The sun was getting low now, maybe an hour from setting. If we were going to make a move, it had to be soon. Spending the night out here in the open wasn't an option, not with temperatures expected to drop below 0. "All right," I said to Casey. "Here's what we're doing. I'm going to approach from the east side, come up along the back wall. You're going to stay here in the trees with eyes on the front door. If something happens, if you see anything wrong, you radio me. If your radio's still dead, you whistle. 3 short bursts. Got it?" Casey nodded. His face was serious now, all that earlier eagerness gone. The mountains had taught him something in the last few hours. Fear has a way of making students out of people. I left my pack with Casey and moved toward the station, staying low. The snow was less deep here on the eastern slope, only about a foot, which made moving easier. I kept my eyes on the windows, looking for movement, for shadows, for anything that seemed off. Nothing. The windows were dark except for the firelight flickering in the main room. Everything looked normal. I reached the back wall and pressed myself against it, listening. I could hear the crackle of the fire inside, the occasional pop of burning wood. No voices, no movement. I edged along the wall toward the back door, my hand on the bear spray canister on my belt. I'd never had to use it on anything but bears, but right then, I wasn't sure what I might be facing. The back door was locked. That was good. That meant whoever was inside had secured the building, standard protocol. I knocked 3 times, clear and authoritative. "Marty, it's Jack Halpern from Bear Creek Junction. You in there?" Silence. Then, after what felt like forever, I heard footsteps inside. Slow, deliberate footsteps moving toward the door. They sounded wrong somehow, the rhythm off, like someone walking who wasn't quite sure how walking worked. The lock clicked. The door opened 6 inches, and Marty Rodriguez's face appeared in the gap. Except it wasn't quite Marty's face. Don't get me wrong, it looked like him. Same square jaw, same thick mustache, same deep-set eyes. But something about the expression was off, like someone was wearing a mask of Marty's face and hadn't quite figured out how to make it look natural. The smile was too wide. The eyes didn't blink enough. "Jack," the thing that looked like Marty said. "Come in, you must be frozen." Every instinct I had was screaming at me to run, but I forced myself to stay calm, to play along. If this was Marty having some kind of episode, maybe a stroke or hypothermia-induced confusion, panicking wouldn't help. "You all right, Marty?" I asked. "You look a little off." Just tired from the storm, he said. His voice sounded right, at least. Been alone up here for 5 days. You know how it gets. 5 days. The storm had lasted 3. Marty should have said 3 days. Yeah, I said slowly. I know how it gets. Listen, my volunteer Casey Vaughn is out here with me. Mind if he comes in too? We could use the radio to report some weird tracks we found on the trail. Of course, Marty said. His smile got wider, impossibly wide, and for just a second I saw something behind his eyes. Something that wasn't Marty at all. Bring him in. Bring him in where it's warm. I backed away from the door, keeping my eyes on him. Let me go get him. Be right back. I turned and walked toward the tree line, forcing myself not to run. Behind me, I heard the door close and the lock click back into place. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. Casey emerged from the trees as I approached. Everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. We're not going in there, I said quietly. That's not Marty. I don't know what it is, but it's not him. What do you mean it's not him? You just talked to him. Something's wrong. The way he moved, the way he talked. He said he'd been alone for 5 days. Storm was 3 days ago, Casey. Rangers don't lose track of time like that. Casey looked past me at the station. The smoke was still rising from the chimney, dark against the fading light. So what do? We can't stay out here all night. We'll freeze. He was right. We needed shelter, heat, and we needed it soon. But going into that building felt like walking into a mouth that was waiting to close. There's an emergency shelter about 2 miles north of here, I said. Pre-positioned supplies, sleeping bags, food. It's not as good as the station, but it's something. 2 miles in the dark? We've got headlamps, and right now, I trust 2 miles of dark forest more than I trust whatever's in that building. Casey looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. All right, you're the veteran here. I'll follow your lead. We strapped on our packs and started moving north, paralleling the tree line. Behind us, I heard the station door open again. I didn't look back. I just kept walking, faster now, putting distance between us and whatever was pretending to be Marty Rodriguez. The sun dropped behind the peaks, and the temperature plummeted. Within 20 minutes it was full dark, and we were navigating by headlamp. The forest was a maze of shadows and snow, and every tree looked the same in the dark. I was navigating by compass and memory, following a route I'd only taken twice before. After about an hour, Casey grabbed my shoulder and pointed off to our right. At first, I didn't see what he was indicating. Then my headlamp caught it. Footprints. That same impossible left footprint appearing in a line that paralleled our path. They were keeping pace with us, staying maybe 20 yards to our right, following us through the forest. Don't stop, I said, keep moving. We pushed on, but the prints stayed with us. Sometimes they'd fall behind, disappearing for a few minutes. Then they'd reappear ahead of us, like whatever was making them could move faster than us when we weren't looking. I tried to keep my light pointing forward. Tried not to think about what might happen if I turned my headlamp toward those prints and saw something standing there. My watch said 7:30 when we finally reached the emergency shelter. It was a small wooden structure, barely bigger than a shed, built specifically for situations like this. Rangers call them oh-shit huts, because if you're using one, it usually means something has gone very wrong with your day. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open and swept my light across the interior. Empty. Just the basic supplies. 3 sleeping bags, a propane heater, water purification tablets, and several days' worth of freeze-dried food. No windows, 1 door, and walls thick enough to hold in heat. Get inside, I told Casey. I'll secure the door. He didn't need to be told twice. He stumbled in and immediately went for the propane heater, his fingers shaking as he tried to light it. I stepped in behind him and pulled the door shut, dropping the heavy wooden bar across it. The shelter had been designed to keep bears out. I hoped it would work on whatever else might be out there. The heater caught, and warm air began filling the small space. Casey sat down hard on one of the sleeping bags, his face pale and drawn. I could see him shaking, and not just from the cold. "What the hell is going on, Jack?" he asked. His voice was barely above a whisper. "What are we running from?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But whatever it is, it's not natural. It's not following normal rules. You think something happened to Marty? You think he's dead?" I didn't answer. I was thinking about Marty's too wide smile, about the way he moved like he'd forgotten how joints worked. Whatever I'd seen in that doorway, it had been wearing Marty's face like a costume. But I couldn't explain that to Casey without sounding insane. We ate freeze-dried beef stew heated with water from our bottles. Neither of us talked much. The shelter was warm now, almost too warm, but neither of us complained. After 3 days in a cold cabin and a day of hiking through snow, the heat felt like a gift. Around 9, Casey unrolled his sleeping bag and climbed in. "You think we're safe here?" "Safe as we can be," I said. "Get some sleep. I'll take first watch." "First watch? Jack, you think something's going to try to get in here?" "I think not being stupid about this is the only reason we're still alive," I said. "So yeah, I'm taking first watch. I'll wake you in 4 hours." Casey didn't argue. Within 10 minutes, he was asleep, his breathing deep and regular. I sat by the heater, my headlamp off to save batteries, watching the faint glow from the propane flame cast shadows on the walls. Outside, I could hear the wind picking up, or at least I thought it was the wind. It sounded wrong, the pitch slightly off, like something trying to imitate wind without quite understanding how it should sound. Around midnight, I heard something else. Footsteps. Not the crunch of snow under boots, but something softer, more deliberate. They circled the shelter slowly, methodically, like whatever was out there was studying it, trying to figure out how to get in. The footsteps stopped at the door. I could hear breathing on the other side of the wood, slow and rhythmic. Then, in a voice that sounded exactly like mine, I heard myself speak. "Casey, open the door. It's Jack. I need to come in." My blood went cold. I looked over at Casey. He was still asleep, hadn't heard it. The voice came again, more insistent this time. "Casey, I'm freezing out here. Open the door, please." I stayed perfectly still, not making a sound. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps moved away from the door, circling the shelter again. Then they stopped. And in the silence that followed, I heard something that made my skin crawl. Humming. Someone outside was humming a tune I recognized, Whiskey in the Jar, an old Irish folk song my father used to sing. I'd hummed it earlier that day while we were hiking. Whatever was out there had been listening. It had been learning. The humming continued for maybe 10 minutes, then stopped. The footsteps moved away, fading into the distance. But I knew it wasn't gone. It was still out there, watching, waiting. I didn't wake Casey for his watch. I stayed up all night, listening to the not quite right wind and the occasional sound of footsteps that seemed to come from every direction at once. When dawn finally came, gray and cold through the cracks in the door, I'd made a decision. We weren't going back the way we came. We weren't going to the Elk Valley station. We were going to head straight down the mountain, following the most direct route to the highway, even if it meant cutting through rough terrain. Because whatever was up here with us, it knew these woods better than I did. It knew the trails, the stations, the shelters. It had been here long before the park was established, maybe before people ever came to these mountains. And I had a terrible feeling that the storm hadn't been natural. It had been a door, opening wide, and something had stepped through. I woke Casey at dawn. He looked rough, dark circles under his eyes, his hair matted down from the sleeping bag. When he sat up, I could see the fear still in his face from yesterday. Good. Fear meant he'd stay sharp. "We're heading down," I said. "Straight shot to Highway 287. No trails, no stations, just down." Casey rubbed his eyes. "How far?" "8 miles, maybe 9, depends on the terrain." I was already packing up my gear, stuffing the sleeping bag into its compression sack. "If we move fast, we can make it by mid-afternoon." "What about Marty? What about reporting what we saw?" "We'll report it when we're off this mountain and somewhere with cell service. Right now, getting down alive is the only thing that matters." Casey looked like he wanted to argue, but something in my face must have stopped him. He started packing his own gear, moving mechanically like his body was on autopilot while his mind was still trying to process what was happening. We ate a quick breakfast of energy bars and left the shelter around 7. The morning was gray and overcast, heavy clouds hanging low over the peaks. New snow was starting to fall, light flurries that drifted down without much wind. My weather sense was screaming at me that another storm was coming. Maybe not as bad as the last one, but enough to make our hike dangerous. We needed to move fast. I set a bearing on my compass. Southeast, straight toward where Highway 287 cut through the valley. The terrain between us and the highway was rough, full of steep slopes and dense forest, but it would be faster than following the winding trail system. More importantly, it would be unpredictable. Whatever was tracking us seemed to know the established routes. Maybe we could lose it by going where people don't normally go. For the first hour, everything was quiet. We descended through a thick pine forest, the trees so dense that the snow hadn't accumulated much on the ground. Our pace was good, and I started to think maybe we'd lost whatever had been following us. Maybe it had gotten bored, found something else to focus on. Then Casey stopped dead. "Jack," he said quietly. "Behind us." I turned. There, maybe 50 yards back up the slope, I saw it. At first, my brain couldn't process what I was looking at. It was tall, at least 7 feet, and its proportions were all wrong. The torso was too long, the limbs too thin. It was moving through the trees, not walking exactly, but sort of flowing, like its bones didn't have normal joints. And it was wearing clothes, torn pieces of park ranger uniform hanging off that impossible frame like decorations. "Run," I said. We ran. Behind us, I could hear it moving, crashing through the underbrush with a sound like breaking branches. It wasn't trying to be quiet anymore. It didn't need to. It had found us, and now it was just a matter of time. The slope got steeper, and we were half running, half sliding down it. I lost my footing once and tumbled about 20 feet before slamming into a tree. Pain exploded in my ribs, but I forced myself up and kept moving. Casey was ahead of me, his eyes wide with panic. The terrain opened up into a narrow ravine, steep rock walls on either side. Bad tactical position, no way out except forward or back. But we didn't have a choice. We plunged into the ravine, our feet crunching through ice-crusted snow. The sounds behind us stopped. I held up a hand, and Casey froze. We stood there in the ravine, breathing hard, listening. Nothing. The forest had gone completely silent again. Even the snow seemed to be falling quieter. "Where is it?" Casey whispered. "I don't know." "Keep moving, slow and quiet." We started forward again, our snowshoes barely making a sound on the packed snow at the bottom of the ravine. The walls rose about 30 feet on either side, jagged rock covered in ice. Above us, the sky was a narrow strip of gray. We walked for maybe 20 minutes. The ravine twisted and turned, and I kept my compass out, making sure we were still heading generally southeast. We'd lost some time with the detour, but as long as we kept moving toward the highway, we'd be okay. That's when I saw the footprints. They weren't coming from behind us this time. They were ahead of us, appearing in the snow right in the middle of the ravine. That same impossible left foot, over and over, evenly spaced. But this time, they were accompanied by something else. Marks in the snow, like something had been dragged. Long, parallel gouges that ran alongside the footprints, disappearing around a bend in the ravine ahead. "We need to turn back," Casey said. His voice was shaking. "Jack, we need to go back right now." He was right. Every instinct was telling me to turn around. But when I looked back the way we'd come, I saw more footprints appearing behind us. They materialized in the snow as we watched, one after another, blocking our retreat. We were trapped. "Forward," I said. "Stay close to me." We moved around the bend, following those drag marks. The ravine widened slightly, opening into a space where a frozen stream cut through the middle. And there, lying on the ice, I saw something that made my stomach turn. It was a body, or what was left of one. Park ranger uniform, but the fabric was rotted, decades old. The body itself was mummified, preserved by the cold. And it was wrong, distorted, like something had reshaped it into an impossible configuration. Casey made a choking sound and turned away, retching. I forced myself to look closer. The ranger's badge was still visible, tarnished but readable. The name etched into it made my blood run cold. William Halpern. My father. My father had died in these mountains 32 years ago. Lost during a winter patrol, they'd said. His body was never recovered. The service held a memorial with an empty casket. I was 6 years old, and now here he was, twisted and wrong, lying on the ice like something's abandoned toy. "No," I whispered. "No, that's not possible." But it was. Somehow it was. And the thing that had taken him, the thing that had kept him all these years, was still here, still hunting, still collecting. A sound echoed through the ravine, bouncing off the walls. Laughter. Not human laughter, but something trying to imitate it, getting the rhythm wrong, the pitch too high. It was coming from above us, from the rim of the ravine. I looked up and saw it. The thing was standing at the edge, silhouetted against the gray sky. It had changed again, its form shifting like smoke, trying on different shapes. As I watched, it started to look more human, its proportions adjusting, its face reforming into something almost recognizable. It was copying me, trying to become me. "Casey," I said, keeping my voice steady. "When I say run, you run straight ahead. Don't stop, don't look back. The ravine opens up about a quarter mile from here. Get to the highway. Flag down a car. Get help. What about you?" "I'll be right behind you." I was lying. We both knew it. "On 3, 1, 2, 3. Casey took off running. The thing on the rim of the ravine shrieked, a sound that hurt my ears, and then it was moving, flowing down the rock wall like water, its body impossibly fluid. I pulled the bear spray from my belt and fired. The orange cloud of capsaicin engulfed the creature as it reached the ravine floor. It recoiled, making a sound like steam escaping, but it didn't stop. It kept coming, its form rippling and changing as it moved. I backed away, spraying in bursts, trying to buy Casey time. The creature was getting closer, and I could see its face now. My face, stretched and distorted like a reflection in a funhouse mirror. Its mouth opened too wide, and I saw teeth that were all wrong, too sharp, too many. My back hit the ravine wall. Nowhere left to go. The creature reached out with something that might have been a hand, fingers too long, joints bending in ways that shouldn't be possible. Then I heard it. A roar, low and powerful. The creature froze, its head whipping around toward the sound. and then I saw what had made it. A grizzly bear, massive, standing at the mouth of the ravine. It had been hibernating somewhere nearby, disturbed by our noise. Now it was angry, territorial, seeing the creature as a threat. The creature turned away from me, its attention shifting to the bear. For a moment, neither moved. Then the bear charged, 800 pounds of muscle and fury. The creature met it head-on, and the impact sounded like thunder. I didn't wait to see what happened. I ran, my lungs burned, my legs screamed, but I kept running, following Casey's tracks through the snow. Behind me, I could hear the sounds of the fight, roaring, shrieking, the crack of breaking branches. The sounds got quieter as I put distance between us, but I didn't slow down. The ravine opened up just like I'd said, and I burst out into a clear area. I could see Casey ahead, still running. Beyond him, maybe a mile away, I could see the highway, a thin black line cutting through the white landscape. We were going to make it. I caught up to Casey at the edge of the tree line. We stumbled onto the shoulder of the highway, gasping, our legs giving out. We collapsed in the snow, neither of us capable of moving any further. A truck appeared around the bend about 5 minutes later. The driver, an older woman with gray hair, pulled over when she saw us. The look on her face said she knew something bad had happened. "You boys all right?" she asked, climbing out of the cab. I tried to answer but couldn't form words. Casey managed to nod. "There's a ranger station about 20 miles south," she said. "Let me get you there." We climbed into the warm cab. As we pulled away, I looked back at the mountains. The snow was falling heavier now, covering our tracks, erasing all evidence of what had happened. Somewhere back there, my father's body lay on the ice. Somewhere back there, something was still hunting, still collecting, still waiting for the next storm to bring it more rangers to add to its collection. I never went back to find out what happened to Marty Rodriguez. The official report said he'd abandoned his post, left the ranger station unlocked, and disappeared. They eventually found the building empty, the fire still burning in the hearth. They never found Marty. They never found that thing wearing his face. And they never found my father's body, because I never told them where to look. Some things are better left buried in the snow. I quit the ranger service 3 months after that day. Told them I wanted to pursue other opportunities, that the mountains weren't for me anymore. They bought it, wrote me a nice recommendation letter, and that was that. 8 years of my life, gone in a form letter and a handshake. Casey quit too. Didn't even wait 3 months. He left 2 weeks after we came down from Roosevelt Peak, and I heard through mutual contacts that he moved to Florida. As far from mountains as he could get. I don't blame him. If I could afford waterfront property in Miami, I'd probably have done the same. But here's the thing. Leaving the service didn't mean leaving it behind. You can quit a job, you can move to a new state, you can change your whole life, but you can't erase what happened. You can't unknow what you know. I found work as a wilderness consultant for a logging company based out of Laramie. Office job, mostly. I review survey maps, assess forest density, recommend sustainable cutting practices. It's boring work, paper-pushing stuff, but it pays the bills and keeps me indoors. My apartment is on the 3rd floor of a building downtown, as urban as Wyoming gets. Concrete and asphalt and the sound of traffic. No trees, no trails, no silence that's too quiet. But the dreams don't care about any of that. I dream about that ravine at least once a week, sometimes more. In the dreams, I'm back there, standing over my father's twisted body, and I can hear that thing laughing from above. Sometimes the body sits up and looks at me with eyes that are wrong, all pupil, no iris. Sometimes my father speaks, but it's not his voice. It's mine, copied and distorted, asking me why I left him there. I wake up in a cold sweat, and for a few seconds, I don't know where I am. The apartment walls feel too close, like a ravine closing in. I have to turn on every light, have to remind myself that I'm not there anymore, that I'm safe. Except, I'm not sure safe means anything anymore. About 6 months after I quit, I started doing research. I needed to understand what we'd encountered, needed to find some framework for it that made sense. I spent hours in the library, reading old journals and historical accounts from the region. I combed through archives, looking for any mention of strange disappearances or unexplained phenomena in the Roosevelt Peak area. I found more than I expected. The first account I came across was from 1923, written by a surveyor named Thomas Wickham. He'd been mapping the area for the U.S. Geological Survey when his partner disappeared during a snowstorm. Wickham wrote that he'd followed his partner's footprints for miles, but the prints never led anywhere. They just stopped, mid-stride, in the middle of an untouched field of snow. No body was ever found. Another account from 1955 described a ranger named David Marsh, who reported seeing a figure moving wrong near Wind Canyon. He said it looked like a person from a distance, but when he got closer, he realized its joints bent backward, and its face was like someone had started to draw a person but forgot how people look. Marsh was later diagnosed with severe frostbite and possible hallucinations from hypothermia. He died 2 years later from complications. His journal entries about the encounter were dismissed as delirium. There were more, lots more, but they were always explained away, always rationalized. Exposure, hallucinations, mental breaks. The human mind can't accept that something exists outside its understanding, so it finds ways to make the impossible fit into comfortable boxes. But I knew better. I'd seen it, I'd run from it, and I'd left my father's body there for it to keep. That last part ate at me. Still does. I tried to go back once about a year after I quit. I drove up to the park, parked at the Bear Creek trailhead, and stared at the path leading into the forest. I sat in my truck for 3 hours, trying to work up the courage to get out and walk in. I couldn't do it. My hands started shaking, my breath got short, and panic hit me so hard I thought I was having a heart attack. I drove home and didn't try again. Instead, I filed an anonymous tip with the Park Service. Said I'd heard from a hiker about seeing what might be human remains in a ravine east of Roosevelt Peak. Gave them detailed coordinates. They sent a search team. They found nothing. Came back saying the ravine was empty except for natural debris. Either I'd remembered the coordinates wrong, or something had moved the body. I'm betting on the latter. Around the 2-year mark, I got a call from someone I didn't expect to hear from. It was Ellen, one of the rangers from Elk Valley Station. We'd worked together a few times before everything went wrong. She was calling to tell me that Tom, her partner at the station, had gone missing during a winter patrol. Last known location, Roosevelt Peak District. "I'm calling everyone who worked up there," Ellen said. Her voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the fear underneath. "Thought maybe you'd heard something or could help with the search." I told her I couldn't. Told her I was sorry, but I was out of that life now. She accepted it, thanked me for my time, and hung up. I sat in my apartment for a long time after that call, staring at nothing. They found Tom 3 weeks later. Or rather, they found his clothes. His uniform was discovered neatly folded next to the Elk Valley Ranger Station. Every piece accounted for except his boots. There was no sign of Tom himself. The official report called it a possible suicide, though no body was recovered. His family didn't buy that explanation. Neither did I, but I didn't tell anyone what I thought really happened. Who would believe me? And even if they did, what could they do about it? You can't fight something that doesn't follow the rules of nature. You can't arrest something that wears faces like masks and leaves footprints that defy physics. All you can do is stay away from the places it hunts. It's been 3 years now since that February storm. I'm still in Laramie, still working my boring office job, still living in my third-floor apartment. I've gotten better at managing the dreams. Therapy helps. Medication helps more. I tell my therapist that I have PTSD from a traumatic incident in the wilderness. That's true enough that I don't feel like I'm lying. Casey reached out to me once about a year ago. Email, short and to the point. He's doing okay in Florida, working as a kayak tour guide. Said he never thinks about Wyoming anymore. Said he's moved on. I didn't reply. We both knew he was lying. You don't move on from something like that. It stays with you, a splinter under your skin that you can never quite dig out. Sometimes I wonder if it's still up there, in those mountains. Still hunting. Still collecting rangers who go out on patrol during winter storms. I wonder if it's gotten better at imitating humans, if it's learned from its mistakes. I wonder if someday it'll figure out how to leave the mountains, how to follow those of us who got away. Mostly, though, I try not to wonder at all. I try to focus on the mundane details of my life. Grocery shopping, paying bills, watching TV shows that don't feature snow or forests or wide-open spaces. I try to be normal, to forget that I know what's out there in the places where people don't usually go. But then winter comes around, and the snow starts falling, and I watch it accumulate on the streets of Laramie. And I remember the silence that was too quiet. I remember the footprints that didn't make sense. I remember my father's twisted body lying on the ice, unclaimed, unburied, kept as some kind of trophy by something that shouldn't exist. And I remember that thing's laughter, echoing off the ravine walls, sounding almost human but not quite. That sound still finds me in my dreams, along with the image of it wearing my face, trying to become me. I got a letter last week. No return address, postmarked from some tiny town in Montana. Inside was a single photograph, printed on glossy paper. It showed a snow-covered forest, trees stark against white ground, and there, clear as day in the center of the image, was a single footprint. Left foot, adult-sized, alone in the snow with no trail leading to it or away from it. On the back of the photo, someone had written 2 words in handwriting I didn't recognize. Still hunting. I burned the photo in my kitchen sink, watched it curl and blacken and turn to ash. Then I flushed the ashes down the drain and scrubbed the sink until my hands were raw. It didn't make me feel better. Nothing makes me feel better except distance and denial. But distance doesn't mean safety, and denial doesn't change what's real. So I live my small life in my small apartment, and I don't go near the mountains, and I tell myself that I'm okay, that I'm coping, that I've moved on. And sometimes, late at night when the city is quiet and the streetlights cast long shadows across my walls, I hear it. That sound. The sound of something walking outside my window, 3 floors up, where nothing should be able to walk. That slow, deliberate pace, like someone learning how to move on 2 legs. I turn on all the lights. I check the locks. I remind myself that I'm safe, that what happened in those mountains can't reach me here in the city. But deep down, I know the truth. I've known it since that February storm, since we found those impossible footprints, since I looked into the face of something wearing Marty's skin like a costume. The mountains weren't its home, they were just its hunting ground. And hunting grounds can expand, territories can grow. Things that stay hidden in isolated places can learn to hunt in new environments. I left the ranger service. I left the mountains. I left my father's body in that ravine because I was too afraid to go back for it. But I'm starting to think that just because I left doesn't mean I got away. The footsteps outside my window continue. Patient, persistent, learning. And I sit here in my apartment, surrounded by locks and lights, and I wait for the night when they finally stop outside my door. Because eventually they will. Things that hunt don't give up. They adapt, they learn. They become better at finding what they're looking for. And what this thing is looking for, what it's always been looking for, is rangers who know the mountains well enough to be afraid of them. Rangers who understand that there are places in the wilderness where the normal rules don't apply. Rangers who've seen what's really out there and survived to remember it. We're special to it somehow. We're the ones it wants. So I wait, and I listen, and I try to convince myself that the footsteps I hear are just my imagination, just echoes of trauma, just the lingering effects of an experience my brain can't fully process. But every morning, when I leave my apartment to go to work, I look at the hallway floor outside my door. And sometimes, just sometimes, I see a faint impression in the carpet. A print that's almost but not quite human, a size too large, a shape too wrong. And I know it's getting closer. My name is Harlan Reed, and I've been a wilderness medic for the National Park Service for 12 years. Before that, I spent 6 years as a combat medic in the Army. 3 tours in places that taught me what the human body looks like when it breaks. I thought I'd seen everything trauma could offer. Gunshot wounds, IED blast injuries, burns that went down to the bone. I'd held pressure on arteries while helicopters screamed overhead. I'd pronounced time of death on soldiers who were laughing 5 minutes before. But nothing I saw in those desert wars prepared me for what happened at Whispering Pines campground in January of last year. It was the 3rd week of the winter closure. The campground had been shut down since November. Gates locked. All facilities winterized. The only person who should have been up there was Sam Porter, the seasonal host who'd volunteered to stay through the cold months to watch the property and prevent vandalism. Sam was good people. Quiet, competent. The kind of guy who could spend 3 months alone in the snow without going stir-crazy. Or so I thought. I was stationed at the Frostbite Creek Patrol Cabin, about 7 miles south of Whispering Pines. My job during winter closure was to maintain the backcountry patrol routes, respond to any emergencies from the handful of extreme winter campers who got permits, and keep an eye on the weather stations scattered through the range. It was lonely work, but I preferred it that way. After the noise of war and the noise of a failed marriage, silence felt like medicine. The incident started on a Tuesday morning, January 23rd. I remember the date because I'd been updating my logbook when the radio crackled to life. Any station, this is Whispering Pines. I need medical assistance. Repeat, medical assistance required. Sam's voice. But something was wrong with it. The words were right. The procedure was right. But his tone was flat, emotionless, like he was reading from a script he didn't understand. I grabbed the radio. Whispering Pines, this is Reed at Frostbite Creek. What's your emergency? Over. Static, long enough that I thought I'd lost the signal. Then, unknown, medical assistance required. Sam, I need details. What's the nature of the injury? Over. More static. This time, when his voice came back, it sounded farther away, like he'd moved away from the radio. Something's wrong, can't explain. You need to come up here. The transmission cut out. I tried calling back 3 times. No response. I looked at my watch. 9:15 in the morning. Temperature outside was sitting at minus 18 degrees Fahrenheit. 7 miles through snow-packed trails in those conditions would take me about 3 hours on snowshoes, maybe less if I pushed hard. If Sam was injured, time mattered. I geared up fast. Medical pack, extra radio batteries, emergency shelter, water, high-calorie food, chemical heat packs, flares. I checked my satellite phone. Full battery, clear signal. Good. The radios were unreliable in winter. Interference from something in the atmosphere that nobody could quite explain. But the sat phone always worked. I stepped outside into air so cold it felt like breathing glass. The sky was that pale gray color that winter brings to high altitude. Not quite cloudy, but not quite clear either. Snow had fallen during the night, maybe 3 inches, just enough to cover yesterday's tracks and make the world look fresh and untouched. I set off north on the Fire Creek Trail, moving at a steady pace. The snowshoes kept me on top of the powder, and my breath came out in thick clouds that hung in the still air before slowly dissipating. Everything was quiet. No wind, no birds, just the rhythmic crunch of my snowshoes and the sound of my breathing. About a mile in, I tried the radio again. Whispering Pines, this is Reed. Sam, if you can hear me, I'm en route. ETA 2 hours. If you can respond, please do. Over. Nothing. Just that empty static hiss. I kept walking. The trail followed Fire Creek, which was frozen solid this time of year. In summer, it was a rushing mountain stream, clear and cold and full of cutthroat trout. Now it was just a ribbon of white cutting through the forest, indistinguishable from the snow around it except for the slight depression marking its course. The forest pressed in on both sides. Lodgepole pines mostly, their branches heavy with snow. In places, the weight had snapped smaller branches, leaving jagged stumps pointing at the sky. I watched for animal tracks, deer, elk, moose, but saw nothing. The wildlife had bedded down somewhere, waiting out the cold. 2 hours and 40 minutes after I left the cabin, I saw the sign for Whispering Pines Campground. It was a wooden marker, carved with the Park Service logo and the campground name. Someone, probably Sam, had cleared the snow from the sign's face. The letters stood out dark against the weathered wood. I passed through the open gate. The campground was designed for maybe 30 sites, spread out through the trees in a rough loop. During summer, it was usually full, families and retirees enjoying the mountain scenery. Now it looked abandoned, almost post-apocalyptic. The picnic tables at each site were buried under snow. The bear-proof food lockers were just humps of white. The fire rings were invisible. Sam's trailer was at the center of the campground near the bathroom facility. It was a small thing, maybe 20 feet long, white aluminum with green trim. Smoke was rising from the chimney pipe, which was good. It meant Sam had heat, meant he was probably okay. I called out as I approached. Sam, it's Harlan Reed. You called for medical assistance? No answer. I could see the trailer door was closed. No tracks in the fresh snow around it except for a single line leading from the door toward the bathroom building, then back again. Sam's tracks from this morning, probably. The snow had been falling when he made them, already starting to fill them in. I knocked on the trailer door. Sam, you in there? Still nothing. I tried the handle. Locked. That's when I heard it. A voice calling from somewhere in the campground. Distant, barely audible, but definitely human. Help! Someone help me! My training kicked in immediately. I dropped my pack, kept just my medical kit, and started moving toward the voice. It was coming from the north side of the campground, somewhere in the trees beyond the designated sites. I'm coming, I shouted. Keep calling out so I can find you. The voice came again. Same words, same tone. Help! Someone help me! I pushed through the tree line, following the sound. The snow was deeper here, untouched by maintenance, and I sank down almost to my knees with each step. The voice called again, and I adjusted my direction. It was maybe 50 yards ahead, somewhere in a thick stand of pines. Keep talking, I yelled. I'm almost there. Help! Someone help me! Same words, exact same intonation. That should have warned me something was wrong, but I was too focused on getting to whoever needed help. In combat medicine, you learn to put blinders on, to focus on the mission, get to the casualty, assess, treat, evacuate. Everything else is noise. I broke through the tree line into a small clearing, and I saw it, a flashlight, standing upright in the snow, beam pointing straight up at the gray sky. No person, no blood, no signs of struggle, just that flashlight, its beam cutting through the air like a thin yellow pillar. I approached, slowly, scanning the area for tracks. Nothing. The snow around the flashlight was pristine, undisturbed. No footprints led to it. No footprints led away. It was just there, placed or dropped or somehow manifested in the middle of untouched snow. The voice didn't call again. I knelt down next to the flashlight, careful not to touch it yet. It was buried about 6 inches deep in the snow, only the lens end and the top inch of the body visible. The beam was bright, strong, the batteries clearly fresh. I pulled out my own flashlight and compared them. Standard Park Service issue. 5 D cells, LED bulb, rubberized grip. Same model I carried. I brushed snow away from the base and grabbed it. The metal was cold, far colder than it should have been even buried in snow. Cold enough that my gloves stuck to it for a second when I tried to adjust my grip. I pulled it free and held it up to examine. The lens was clear. The bulb was functioning. But when I looked close, I saw something that made my skin crawl. The inside of the lens was covered in frost. Not condensation, not a little fog. Thick, crystalline frost, coating the inner surface of the glass in intricate patterns. Frost that could only form if the air inside the flashlight was somehow colder than the air outside. That wasn't possible. Flashlights generate heat when they run. The LED and the battery chemistry both produce warmth. The inside should have been warmer than the outside, not colder. I clicked it off, the beam died, and suddenly the clearing seemed darker, more oppressive. I clicked it back on, the light returned, steady and strong. I held it up to my ear and shook it gently. The batteries rattled inside, loose, like they'd somehow come free from their normal tight fit. "Sam!" I called out. My voice sounded too loud in the silence. "Sam, where are you?" No response. Not even an echo. The trees seemed to absorb the sound. I marked the location on my GPS and put the flashlight in my pack. Then I started a search pattern, moving in expanding circles from where I'd found it. I was looking for tracks, for blood, for anything that would explain how that flashlight ended up here. But the snow was untouched in every direction. Whoever put it here had done so without leaving a trace. After 20 minutes of searching, I gave up and headed back to Sam's trailer. The sun had moved higher in the sky, but it didn't seem to make anything warmer. If anything, the temperature felt like it was dropping. I reached the trailer and knocked again, harder this time. "Sam, Park Service, open up!" Still nothing. I made a decision. Sam had called for medical help, then disappeared. There might be an emergency inside. That gave me justification to force entry. I tried the windows first. Locked. I moved around to the back, where a small propane tank was connected to the trailer's heating system. The propane gauge showed half full. The system was running, heat flowing into the trailer. Through a small window I could see the interior. The lights were on. A coffee cup sat on the small table, steam rising from it. Fresh coffee. Sam was here, or had been here minutes ago. I went back to the door and used my shoulder. The cheap lock gave way on the second hit, and the door swung open into the warm interior. "Sam, it's Harlan Reed. I'm coming in." The trailer was tiny. Combination kitchen and living space, a small bathroom, and a sleeping area in the back. Everything was neat, organized. Sam's coat hung on a hook by the door. His boots were lined up underneath. The coffee cup I'd seen was on the table, still steaming. But Sam wasn't there. I checked the bathroom, empty. I checked the sleeping area. The bed was made, military corners, no wrinkles. I opened the small closet. Sam's clothes hung in neat rows. His park service uniforms on the left, personal clothes on the right. No Sam. I stood in the center of the trailer trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Fresh coffee. Running heat. Coat and boots still here, but no Sam. Nobody goes outside in -18-degree weather without a coat and boots. Not unless they want to be dead in 20 minutes. I grabbed the radio clipped to my belt. Any station, this is Reed at Whispering Pines. I need assistance for a possible missing person. Repeat, possible missing person at Whispering Pines Campground. Over. Static. I waited, more static. Then, cutting through the hiss, a voice. Reed, this is Whispering Pines, no assistance needed. Sam's voice, flat, emotionless. Same tone as his original call. Sam, where are you? I'm in your trailer. You're not here. No assistance needed. Sam, where the hell are you? The radio went silent. I tried again, nothing. I stepped outside the trailer and looked around the campground. The trees. The buried picnic tables. The white expanse of snow stretching in every direction. Sam! I shouted at the top of my lungs. If you can hear me, call out! My voice echoed once, weak, then died. The silence that followed was absolute. Not even the wind made a sound. That's when I noticed something I'd missed before. The tracks leading from Sam's trailer to the bathroom building and back, they didn't quite line up. The stride length was off. The depth was inconsistent. It looked like someone had tried to walk in someone else's footprints, but hadn't gotten it quite right. I followed the track line. It went from the trailer door to the bathroom building, then looped around the building once, twice, 3 times, getting tighter with each loop. Then it ended at the building's wall. Just stopped. No footprints leading away, no indication of where whoever made them had gone. I tried the bathroom door. Locked. I peered through the narrow window. The interior was dark, but I could make out the shapes of sinks and stall doors. No movement. No Sam. I walked back to the trailer, my mind racing. Nothing about this made sense. The flashlight in the clearing, the voice calling for help, Sam's empty trailer with fresh coffee, the impossible footprints that led nowhere. My watch said it was 2:30 in the afternoon. I'd been at the campground for almost an hour. I needed to make a decision. Either I searched until I found Sam, or I hiked back to my cabin and called for a full search and rescue team. The professional thing to do was call for backup. But that would take time. Hours, maybe a full day to get a team mobilized and up here. And if Sam was out there somewhere, hurt, without a coat, he didn't have hours. I made my choice. I'd search until dark, then reassess. I spent the next 4 hours combing through the campground. I checked every site, every structure, every possible place a person could be. I found nothing. No more impossible footprints. No more voices calling for help. Just silence and snow and the growing cold as the sun started its descent. At 6:30, with the light failing, I returned to Sam's trailer. I turned on every light I could find, trying to push back the darkness. I made myself coffee from Sam's pot, which was still warm. The whole situation felt surreal, like I'd stepped into someone else's nightmare. I tried the radio again. Any station, any station. This is Reed at Whispering Pines. I'm staying overnight to continue search at first light. If anyone receives this message, please acknowledge. Over. Static, then, cutting through with perfect clarity. Reed, this is Whispering Pines. I'm here. Everything's fine. Sam's voice, right outside the trailer. I grabbed my flashlight and yanked open the door. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the snow-covered campground. Nobody was there. Sam, I called. "Sam, if that's you, show yourself." "Everything's fine," the radio crackled. But the voice wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from the radio on my belt. I stood in the doorway, cold air pouring into the trailer, staring out into the darkness, and I realized something that made my blood run cold. The fresh snow that had been falling all day had stopped, and in the beam of my flashlight I could see that there were no tracks anywhere around the trailer. None. Not mine from when I'd entered, not the morning tracks I'd seen earlier. Nothing. The snow was perfectly smooth, untouched, like nobody had been here at all. I backed into the trailer and slammed the door shut. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at Sam's small table, my flashlight on, my medical kit open in front of me, and I tried to make sense of what was happening. Every time I started to drift off, I'd jerk awake, convinced I'd heard something outside. A voice, footsteps, the crunch of snow, but whenever I looked, there was nothing. The hours crawled past with agonizing slowness. I kept checking my watch, convinced it had stopped. 9:30, 9:32, 9:33. Each minute felt like 10. The propane heater hissed softly, throwing shadows that danced and shifted with the flickering flame. I found myself staring at those shadows, seeing shapes that weren't there, faces that dissolved when I focused on them. At midnight, I heard something that made me freeze. Music. Faint, distorted, coming from somewhere outside. Not a radio, not any instrument I recognized. It sounded like wind chimes, but the notes were wrong, discordant, creating patterns that hurt to follow. I went to the window and pressed my face against the cold glass, trying to see the source. The campground was dark except for the moon reflecting off the snow. And there, at the edge of the tree line, I saw them again. Those shapes. They were swaying slowly, rhythmically, like they were dancing to the music. Or maybe they were creating it. I couldn't tell which. I backed away from the window, my heart hammering. The music continued for maybe 20 minutes, then stopped as abruptly as it had started. The silence that followed was somehow worse. I sat back down at the table and forced myself to take slow, steady breaths. In through the nose, out through the mouth. A technique they taught us for managing panic in combat situations. At 1 in the morning, I noticed something wrong with the trailer. The temperature was dropping. Not gradually, like the heater had failed, but fast. In the span of maybe 5 minutes, I went from comfortable to seeing my breath. I checked the propane gauge, still half full. The heater was working, I could hear it running, but the heat wasn't staying in the space. It was like something was drawing it out, pulling the warmth from the air. I put on my coat, my gloves, my hat, pulled out a chemical heat pack and cracked it, feeling the exothermic reaction generate warmth in my hands. But even that felt muted, like the heat was being siphoned away before it could reach my skin. At 2 in the morning, my sat phone finally died. The battery had been full when I arrived. I'd checked it 3 times, but now the screen was black, and when I tried to power it on, nothing happened. I opened the battery compartment. The battery itself looked fine, but when I touched it, it was ice cold. Batteries don't work when they're that cold. I tried to warm it with my body heat, tucking it inside my jacket, but it didn't help. Whatever was happening here didn't follow normal thermodynamics. Around 3 in the morning, I pulled out the flashlight I'd found in the clearing. I'd wrapped it in a cloth and buried it at the bottom of my pack, some instinctive part of me not wanting to touch it more than necessary. Now I laid it on the table and examined it under the bright LED light of my headlamp. The frost on the inside of the lens had gotten thicker. The patterns were more elaborate now, branching fractals that looked almost organic, like ice crystals growing inside the glass. I clicked the flashlight on. The beam was dimmer than before, struggling to penetrate the frost. The batteries rattled when I moved it. I unscrewed the back cap and dumped the batteries onto the table. All 5 D cells tumbled out, but they looked wrong. The labels were faded, like they'd been exposed to sunlight for years instead of hours. The metal contacts were corroded, covered in a white powder that looked like salt but felt greasier when I touched it. I tested them with my multimeter. Dead. All 5 completely drained of power. But that was impossible. When I'd found the flashlight, it had been burning bright. These batteries should have had hours of life left in them. There was no way they could have drained this fast, unless the flashlight had been using power for something other than making light. I pushed that thought away. I was getting paranoid, letting the isolation and the strangeness get to me. There had to be a rational explanation. Equipment malfunction. Cold affecting the battery chemistry. Something. I reassembled the flashlight and put it back in my pack. Then I tried the radio again. Any station, this is Reed at Whispering Pines. If anyone can hear this, please respond. Over. Static. I waited a full minute. Nothing. I tried my satellite phone. No signal. That shouldn't have been possible. Sat phones worked anywhere with a clear view of the sky, and I was in an open valley. But the screen just showed searching for signal over and over. I was cut off, completely isolated. 7 miles from my cabin with no way to communicate and a missing person I couldn't find. When dawn finally came, gray and cold, I felt relief just having light again. I heated water on Sam's propane stove and made instant coffee. The normalcy of the routine helped calm my nerves. Coffee, breakfast, gear check. Same things I'd done 1,000 times before. I stepped outside at 7:30. The temperature had dropped overnight. My thermometer read -23. My breath froze in the air, tiny ice crystals glittering in the weak morning light. The campground looked different in daylight. Wrong somehow. The proportions felt off, like the spaces between the trees were wider than they should be. I told myself it was just the snow, the way it covered and smoothed everything, made the familiar alien. I started my search pattern again, moving through the campground in a grid. This time, I was looking for anything unusual. Broken branches, disturbed snow, animal tracks. Anything that might give me a clue. I found it at the eastern edge of the campground, where the tree line started to climb toward the higher elevation. Another flashlight standing upright in the snow, beam pointing at the sky. My stomach dropped. I approached slowly, already knowing what I'd find. Same Park Service issue flashlight. Same impossible placement with no tracks around it. Same frost coating the inside of the lens. I pulled out my GPS and marked the location, then compared it to yesterday's find. The 2 spots were exactly 127 meters apart. I did the math in my head. A 7-pointed star pattern would space points roughly that distance apart if you drew it across the campground. 5 more flashlights to find. I didn't want to find them. Every instinct was screaming at me to grab my gear and start hiking back to Frostbite Creek cabin. But I couldn't leave. Not without Sam. Not without knowing what happened to him. I spent the morning searching. I found the 3rd flashlight at 11, the 4th at 1:30. Each one exactly 127 meters from the last. Each one standing upright in pristine snow. Each one with frost inside the lens and drained batteries. Between each discovery, I took detailed notes. Marked GPS coordinates. Photographed everything from multiple angles. My training demanded documentation, evidence, proof. Even as part of me understood that no amount of evidence would make this make sense. The 3rd flashlight was different in one small way. When I picked it up, it was vibrating slightly, Not mechanically, not like a phone on silent. This was more subtle, like the metal itself was resonating at a frequency just below the threshold of hearing. I held it to my ear. Nothing. But I could feel it through my gloves, a steady pulse that seemed to match my heartbeat. The fourth flashlight wasn't alone. Next to it, half buried in the snow, I found a small leather journal. The cover was stiff with cold, the pages brittle. I recognized it immediately. Sam's field journal. He'd shown it to me once, months ago, proud of the detailed observations he kept about weather patterns and wildlife activity. I opened it carefully, afraid the pages would crack. The last entry was dated January 21st, 2 days before his distress call. The handwriting was Sam's, but the words made my skin crawl. Found the first one today, just standing in the snow near Site 12. No tracks, no explanation. Brought it back to the trailer. Frost on the inside of the lens. How is that possible? The physics don't work. Battery's dead, but it's still burning. Still burning. Still burning. The same phrase, still burning, repeated down the page, getting smaller, more frantic. Then a different entry. No date. 3 now. They form a triangle. I can feel it pulling at me. Dreams getting worse. Dreams of cold. Dreams of voices. Dreams where I'm standing outside, watching myself sleep. Which one is real? Which one is the dream? The final entry was just 2 words, written so hard the pencil had torn through the paper. Pattern completes. I closed the journal and put it in my pack. Evidence, proof that Sam had found the flashlights first. That whatever was happening, it had started with his discovery. But that raised more questions than it answered. Who had placed the flashlights? When? And why did completing the pattern trigger something? By the time I found the 5th one at 3 o'clock, I'd mapped the pattern. 7 points arranged in a perfect star across the campground, with Sam's trailer sitting at the exact center. 2 more flashlights to go. The light was already starting to fade. Winter days this far north are short, especially in the mountains where the peaks block the sun early. I had maybe 2 hours of useful daylight left. I found the 6th flashlight just before 4. Only 1 left. According to my map, it should be on the southwest side of the campground, somewhere near the access road. I headed that direction, moving fast. The temperature was dropping again, and the sky had that heavy gray look that meant snow was coming. I needed to find that last flashlight and get inside before the weather turned. I was 50 meters from where my GPS said it should be when I heard the voice again. "Help! Someone help me!" Same words, same tone, coming from directly ahead of me. "Sam?" I called. "Is that you? Help! Someone help me!" I pushed forward through the snow, fighting the resistance. The voice was close now, maybe 20 meters. I could see a shape ahead, dark against the white snow. "I'm coming. Stay where you are." I broke through a stand of low brush and stopped. The 7th flashlight was there, standing upright, beam pointing skyward. But next to it, half buried in the snow, was something else. A body, face down, wearing a Park Service coat. I rushed forward and dropped to my knees beside it. My hands were shaking as I rolled the body over, already pulling out my medical kit, running through trauma protocols in my head. It was Sam. His face was white, his lips blue. His eyes were closed, no visible signs of injury, no blood. But when I pressed my fingers to his throat, searching for a pulse, his skin was like ice. Colder than flesh should be. Colder than death should be. I ripped open my kit and grabbed the emergency blanket, wrapping it around him. I checked for breathing. Nothing. I tilted his head back to check his airway. That's when his eyes opened. Not slowly, not like someone regaining consciousness. They just opened all at once, snapping wide, pupils dilated so large that barely any iris showed. "Sam," I said, "can you hear me?" His mouth opened, but the voice that came out wasn't his. It was mine. "Help! Someone help me!" My own voice, recorded and played back, coming from Sam's mouth. His lips didn't move right. The timing was off, like there was a delay between the audio and the video. "Sam, what's happening? What's wrong?" He sat up. The motion was wrong. Mechanical, like someone who'd never sat up before and was figuring it out as they went. The emergency blanket fell away. "Help! Someone help me!" His mouth repeated my words again, still in my voice. I backed away, my hand going to the bear spray on my belt. Sam's head turned to follow me, the movement too smooth, too fluid. His eyes never blinked. "Sam, you need to lie back down. You're in shock. You're hypothermic. Let me help you." He stood up. Again, that wrong, mechanical motion. He took a step toward me. "Sam, stop. Just stop and talk to me." "Help! Someone help me!" Another step. His arms hung at his sides, fingers twitching slightly. Snow was falling from his clothes, and underneath I could see that his Park Service coat was the wrong color. Too dark. Stained with something I didn't want to identify. I backed away, keeping the distance between us constant. "Sam, I don't know what's happening, but I need you to stay calm. We're going to get you help. Just don't move." He took another step, then another. His pace was steady, unhurried. His face showed no expression, just those wide, dark eyes locked onto me. I turned and ran. Behind me, I could hear him following. Not running, just walking at that same steady pace. But somehow he was keeping up, somehow staying the same distance behind me, no matter how fast I moved. I crashed through the brush, heading back toward Sam's trailer. My legs burned, my lungs screamed in the cold air, but I didn't stop. I could hear him behind me, crashing through the same brush, his footsteps in perfect rhythm with mine. I burst into the clearing where the trailer sat. The door was still open from this morning. I ran for it, my boots slipping on the icy snow. Behind me, those steady footsteps continued. I reached the door and spun around. Sam was 20 feet away, walking toward me with that mechanical gait. His mouth opened again. "Help! Someone help me!" I slammed the door and locked it. Then I grabbed Sam's small table and shoved it against the door. It wouldn't stop him, but it might slow him down. Through the window, I could see him approaching. He reached the door and stopped. His hand came up slowly and knocked 3 times. Precise, measured knocks. "Sam?" I called through the door. "Can you understand me?" "Help! Someone help me!" He knocked again. Same 3 knocks, same spacing, like he was following a script, but didn't understand what the script was for. I backed away from the door and pulled out my radio. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped it. Any station. This is Reed at Whispering Pines. I need immediate assistance. I have a medical emergency and possible psychological breakdown. Over. Static. Then, cutting through clear and strong. "Reed, this is Whispering Pines. Everything's fine." Sam's voice, his real voice, not mine, played back, coming from my radio. But Sam was outside the door, knocking. "Sam, is that you? Are you on the radio?" "Everything's fine. No need to worry." "Where are you?" "I found someone who looks like you, but something's wrong with him." "I'm here. I'm always here." The knocking stopped. I looked through the window. Sam was still standing there, but he'd stopped moving. He was just standing perfectly still, arms at his sides, face blank, eyes staring at the door. "Sam, listen to me. I need you to tell me what's happening. What did you find up here?" The radio crackled. I found the lights. 7 lights in the snow. I found them all. What lights? The flashlights? They were calling. All of them calling at once. Voices in the light. Voices in the ice. Sam, you're not making sense. I need you to... You found them too now. All 7, the pattern's complete. It's been waiting so long, Reed, so long in the cold. What's been waiting? The radio went silent. Outside, Sam started walking again, but not towards the door. He was moving away, heading back into the trees. His gait was still wrong, still mechanical, but he was moving with purpose now, like he'd been given new instructions. I watched him disappear into the forest. Then I sank down onto the floor, my back against the wall, trying to control my breathing. Something was very wrong at Whispering Pines. Something that had started before I got here. Something that had taken Sam and was using him like a puppet. Something that had created a pattern with those flashlights. A 7-pointed star with the trailer at the center. And now the pattern was complete. I looked at my watch. 4:40. The sun was setting. I had maybe 30 minutes of light left. After that, it would be full dark for the next 14 hours. I wasn't going to survive this alone. I needed help. I needed to get back to my cabin and call for backup, real backup, people with resources and expertise. But to get back to my cabin, I'd have to cross 7 miles of wilderness in the dark. With Sam, or whatever was wearing Sam, out there somewhere. With those flashlights arranged in their star pattern, doing whatever they were designed to do. I pulled out my map and studied it. The Fire Creek Trail was the most direct route back, but it would take me past at least 3 of the flashlight locations. There was another route, longer but higher elevation, that would keep me away from the star pattern. It would add 2 hours to the hike, but it felt safer. I started gathering my gear. I'd take everything I could carry, medical kit, extra food, water, chemical heat packs, emergency shelter. I'd leave at first light tomorrow, move fast, and be back at my cabin by mid-morning. From there, I could use the landline to call the superintendent and request a full investigation team. The radio crackled again. "Reed, don't leave," Sam's voice. But which Sam? The real one, or the thing wearing his face? Sam, if that's really you, tell me something only you would know. Silence, then. "Don't leave. It's not safe in the dark." "Where are you, Sam? Your real location, right now." "I'm everywhere now, all through the pattern, all through the light." I turned off the radio. I didn't want to hear any more. The sun set at 5:07. I watched it go from the trailer window, watched the light drain out of the world and leave everything gray, then blue, then black. The darkness in the mountains isn't like darkness in the city. It's absolute, oppressive, a physical presence that pushes in from all sides. I lit Sam's propane lantern and set it in the center of the table. The warm glow pushed back the dark, created a small bubble of light and safety. I knew it was an illusion, but illusions are all we have sometimes. Around 8, I heard it. A sound from outside, not knocking this time, humming. Someone was humming a tune I didn't recognize, something slow and discordant. The melody was wrong, notes that didn't quite fit together. I looked out the window. In the darkness, beyond the reach of the lantern light, I could see lights. 7 of them, arranged in a circle around the trailer. 7 flashlight beams pointing inward, their frost-covered lenses giving the light a strange, diffuse quality. And between the beams, in the darkness, shapes were moving. I killed the lantern. If something was out there, I didn't want to be visible. I crouched below the window level and watched through the lower corner of the glass. The 7 flashlight beams stayed constant, unmoving. The shapes I'd seen were still there, darker patches against the darkness, circling the trailer slowly. I counted at least 3 distinct forms, maybe more. They moved without sound, without disturbing the snow, drifting like smoke. My night vision started to adjust. The shapes resolved into more detail, and I wish they hadn't. They were human-shaped, roughly, but the proportions were wrong. Too tall, limbs too thin, heads that sat at odd angles on their shoulders. One of them stopped directly in front of the trailer window. I froze, not even breathing. In the ambient glow from the flashlights, I could make out features. It was wearing Sam's face, or a version of it. The features were right, but the arrangement was slightly off, like someone had described Sam to an artist who'd never seen him. Its mouth opened, my voice came out. "Help! Someone help me!" The other shapes stopped their circling. They all turned toward the trailer, toward me, and one by one, they started speaking, all in my voice. All the same words I'd called out yesterday when I was searching for whoever needed help. "Help! Someone help me!" A chorus of my own voice, spoken by things that weren't me, weren't human. The sound was wrong, overlapping and echoing, creating harmonics that hurt to hear. I backed away from the window, my heart hammering. I needed light. I needed to see. Operating in darkness was giving these things the advantage. I fumbled for my flashlight, clicked it on. The beam illuminated the interior of the trailer. Everything looked normal. Table, chairs, small kitchenette, Sam's belongings. Ordinary, safe, real. I moved the beam toward the window. The shapes were still there, still standing in their circle. The light from my flashlight touched one of them and it recoiled, its form losing definition, becoming more smoke-like. The voices stopped. Light hurt them. Or at least, direct light disrupted them somehow. I grabbed every light source I could find. Sam's flashlights, my spare batteries, chemical glow sticks. I turned on everything, creating as much illumination as possible. The trailer became a bubble of light in the darkness, bright enough to push back the shadows. Through the window, I could see the shapes retreating, moving back toward the circle of flashlights. They stayed just outside the reach of the trailer's light, hovering at the edge of visibility. But they didn't leave. They just waited. I checked my watch, 8:40. At least 10 hours until dawn. 10 hours to hold out in this trailer, hoping the propane didn't run out, hoping the batteries didn't die, hoping those things outside didn't figure out how to get in. My training kept trying to assert itself. I'd been in worse situations. Ambushes in Afghanistan. Firefights where the casualties kept coming faster than I could treat them. I'd learned to stay calm, to focus, to break problems down into manageable pieces. But this was different. This wasn't enemy combatants or natural disasters. This was something that violated the basic rules of reality. Things that shouldn't exist, doing things that weren't possible. I tried the radio again, keeping my voice low. Any station. This is Reed at Whispering Pines. If anyone can hear this, I need immediate extraction. Hostile situation. Repeat, hostile situation. Over. Static. Then, cutting through. Reed, this is Frostbite Creek. My own voice. Coming from my cabin 7 miles away. Impossible. Identify yourself, I said. This is Reed. I'm at my cabin. Everything's normal here. That's not possible. I'm Reed. I'm at Whispering Pines. No, my voice said calmly. You're at Whispering Pines. I'm at Frostbite Creek. We're both Reed. The pattern's complete now. We can be in multiple places. I turned off the radio and threw it across the trailer. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor. My hands were shaking, my breathing too fast. I was losing it, the isolation, the strangeness, the impossible things I was seeing. It was breaking down my ability to think rationally. I forced myself to slow down. Breathe. Count to 10. Use the techniques they taught us for managing combat stress. Ground yourself in physical reality. Name 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear. I was halfway through the exercise when all the lights in the trailer went out. Not just dimmed, completely dead. The propane lantern, the flashlights, even the chemical glow sticks. Everything dark in an instant. I fumbled for my flashlight, clicked the switch. Nothing. I tried my headlamp. Dead. The spare flashlight in my pack. Dead. Something had drained them, all of them, simultaneously. In the darkness, I heard the trailer door creak open. I hadn't heard it unlock. I'd wedged the table against it. But somehow it was opening anyway, slowly, hinges groaning in the cold. "Stay back," I said. My voice sounded small, swallowed by the dark. "I'm armed." I wasn't. Bear spray and a medical kit aren't much use against things that aren't really there, but bluffing was all I had. The door opened wider. Cold air poured in, dropping the temperature in the trailer by what felt like 20 degrees in seconds. My breath came out in clouds I couldn't see. Footsteps. Something entering the trailer. Multiple somethings. I could hear them moving in the darkness. That same mechanical gate surrounding me. "What do you want?" I asked. A voice answered, Sam's voice. The real one this time, not the flat recording. "We don't want anything, Reed. We're just hungry. It's been so long since anyone came here in winter, so long since the pattern was last complete. Where's Sam? The real Sam? I'm Sam. I'm all the Sams. Every version that's ever been here. That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't have to. You'll understand soon, when you're part of it too." I felt something touch my shoulder. Fingers, long and cold. They wrapped around my arm with a grip like frozen metal. I jerked away, stumbled backward, hit the wall. Other hands grabbed me, multiple sets, holding me in place. I struggled, but it was like fighting shadows. Nothing solid to strike, nothing to push against. Just that cold pressure holding me immobile. "Don't fight," Sam's voice said. "It doesn't hurt. You just get cold, so cold, and then you're part of the pattern, part of the light." "No," I said. "No, I'm not." Something pressed against my face, over my mouth and nose. I couldn't breathe. I thrashed, tried to break free, but those hands held me firm. My lungs started to burn. Panic flooded through me. I was going to die here, suffocated in the dark by things that shouldn't exist. My vision started to gray out. Not that I could see anything in the darkness anyway, but I could feel consciousness slipping away, could feel my body shutting down from lack of oxygen. Then, suddenly, the hands released me. I dropped to the floor, gasping, sucking in air that hurt my throat with its cold. Light flooded the trailer. Bright, harsh LED light. I squinted against it, trying to see what was happening. The shapes were retreating, flowing back toward the door. Through my watering eyes, I could see why. Someone was standing in the doorway, holding a flashlight. A big one, the kind search and rescue teams use, 10,000 lumens of light that could turn night into day. "Reed, you in here?" A voice I recognized. Tom Aldridge, ranger from the Crystal Peak station. He swept his light across the trailer, and the shapes dissolved in its beam like mist. "Tom?" My voice was hoarse. "How did you—" "Got a ping from your satellite beacon, the emergency one on your pack. You activated it?" I hadn't, but I wasn't going to argue. "There's something here, in the campground. It took Sam. I know," Tom said. "That's why I came up. We've been tracking incidents in this area for years. Unexplained disappearances, equipment failures, rangers reporting things that don't make sense." He stepped fully into the trailer, and I saw he wasn't alone. 2 other rangers were with him, both carrying high-powered lights. They moved like a military unit, practiced, efficient. "We need to get you out of here," Tom said. "Right now, before they regroup." "What about Sam?" Tom's expression hardened. "Sam's gone, Reed. Whatever these things are, they got him 3 days ago. What you've been seeing, that's not Sam anymore." "But I talked to him on the radio." "They can mimic voices, appearances, behavior patterns. They record and replay. But the original is gone. Has been since he first found the pattern." "The flashlights?" "Yeah. Someone, we don't know who, set them up decades ago. Maybe longer. They're markers, boundaries. When the pattern's complete, these things can manifest. They use winter, the cold, the isolation. They feed on something in us. Our warmth, maybe. Our life force. We don't really understand it." One of the other rangers spoke up. "Sir, we need to move, now. They're regrouping outside." Tom nodded. "Reed, can you walk?" I got to my feet. My legs were shaky, but they held. "Yeah, I can make it." "Good. Stay in the light. Don't let the shadows touch you. We've got a snowmobile waiting at the access road. Once we're there, we're safe. They can't leave the campground." We moved out of the trailer in formation, the 3 rangers' lights creating an overlapping bubble of illumination. I stayed in the center, my eyes scanning the darkness beyond the light. I could see them out there. Dozens now, not just the 7. They'd multiplied somehow, or more had been drawn by the completed pattern. They circled us at a distance, staying just outside the reach of the lights. The snow beneath our feet felt wrong. Too soft in some places, too hard in others. My snowshoes would sink 6 inches on one step, then barely leave an impression on the next. The ground itself seemed unstable, like we were walking on something that wasn't quite solid. "Don't look at them," Tom said. "Eyes forward, keep moving." But I couldn't help it. I glanced to my right just for a second, and I saw one of the shapes clearly. It had Sam's face. Not the distorted version I'd seen before, but his actual face, perfectly replicated. It was smiling at me. The smile was too wide, showing too many teeth, but it was unmistakably Sam's smile. "Reed." Tom's voice cut through my thoughts. "Eyes forward. Now." I looked away, but the image stayed burned into my mind. Sam's face on that impossible body, smiling like he'd finally understood a joke that had been bothering him for years. We walked toward the access road. The shapes followed, pacing us, occasionally darting closer before retreating when the light touched them. I could hear them speaking now, a chorus of voices. Some were mine. Some were Sam's. Others I didn't recognize, probably from rangers who'd been here before, rangers who'd been taken. The words they spoke were fragments, pieces of conversations torn from context and reassembled wrong. My voice saying medical assistance required, mixed with Sam's voice saying the pattern completes, mixed with a woman's voice I didn't know saying 7 points, 7 points, 7 points. Tom's radio crackled. A voice came through, clear despite the static. "Tom, this is headquarters. Abort mission. Return to base immediately." Tom ignored it, kept walking. The voice came again, more insistent. "Tom, acknowledge. This is a direct order. Abort and return." "That's not headquarters," Tom said quietly. "Keep moving." The voice on the radio changed. Now it was Tom's own voice, speaking to himself. "Tom, you're making a mistake. You can't save him. He's already gone, already part of the pattern. Turn back while you still can." Tom reached down and ripped the radio from his belt, threw it into the snow. Nobody else talk on the radio. They're listening. They're learning. My watch said we'd been walking for 10 minutes. But when I checked my GPS, we'd only covered maybe 50 meters. Time and distance were both distorting, stretching like rubber. I looked at the access road. It should have been close. Instead, it seemed to be receding, getting farther away with each step we took toward it. "Tom," I said, "something's wrong. The distances aren't right." "I know. Keep moving. Don't think about it. Just put one foot in front of the other." One of the other rangers, a younger guy whose name I didn't know, started hyperventilating. "We're not getting anywhere. We're just walking in circles. We're never getting out." "Shut up," Tom snapped. "Control your breathing. We are getting out. I've done this before." "How many times?" I asked. Tom didn't answer, but the look on his face told me enough. This wasn't his first extraction from Whispering Pines. How many rangers had he pulled out of here? How many hadn't made it? The shapes were getting bolder. They pressed closer to the edge of our light bubble, testing its boundaries. One of them reached out with something that might have been a hand, fingers extending impossibly long, stretching toward my face. The ranger on my left swept his light across it, and the shape recoiled, its form dissolving like smoke. "They're getting stronger," the ranger said. "The pattern's feeding them." "Then we break the pattern," Tom said. He pulled something from his pack, a flare gun. "When I fire this, run. Don't stop. Don't look back. The road is close. Closer than it looks. Trust me." He aimed the flare gun at the sky and fired. The flare shot up, leaving a trail of red light. At its apex, it exploded into a brilliant red star that lit up the entire campground. In that moment of illumination, I saw them clearly. Hundreds of shapes, not dozens. They filled the spaces between the trees, crowded the clearings, covered every surface. They were everywhere, and they were all looking at us. "Run!" Tom screamed. We ran. "How long has this been going on?" I asked. "Best we can tell, since the 1950s, Tom said. "Maybe earlier. There are stories from the trappers and mountain men before that. Something in this valley. Something that only comes out in the deepest winter." We reached the access road. The snowmobile was there, idling, its headlights cutting through the darkness. Another ranger sat on it, keeping watch. "Get on," Tom ordered. "We'll follow you down." I climbed onto the snowmobile. The driver didn't wait for me to get settled before gunning the engine. We shot forward, and I grabbed hold of the handles, the acceleration almost throwing me off the back. Behind us, the three rangers formed a rear guard, their lights creating a wall between us and the pursuing shapes. I watched them get smaller as we sped away, watched the campground fade into the distance. We reached the main highway in 40 minutes. A Park Service truck was waiting there, heater running. Tom and the other rangers arrived 10 minutes later on their own snowmobiles. None of them spoke as we loaded into the truck and started the drive down to the valley. I looked back once as we descended. Up in the mountains, I could see lights. 7 points of light arranged in a star pattern, glowing against the darkness. Still there. Still waiting. Still hungry. They kept me at the ranger headquarters in Jackson for 3 days. Medical evaluation, psychological assessment, debriefing. The doctors said I was dehydrated and showing early signs of hypothermia, but otherwise physically fine. The psychologist was more concerned. Possible trauma response, she said. Acute stress reaction. Recommended counseling and a month of administrative leave. I took the leave, but I didn't take the counseling. Tom Aldridge visited me on the 3rd day before they released me. He found me in the break room, staring out the window at the mountains in the distance. Whispering Pines was up there somewhere, hidden in the valleys, still waiting. "How you holding up?" he asked. I shrugged. "Been better. Been worse, too." He pulled up a chair. "I wanted to talk to you before you left, off the record. About what happened up there. About what you know now. About what you saw." I turned away from the window. Why me? Why didn't anyone warn me about that place? Because most people who go up there come back fine. The pattern isn't always complete. Sometimes one of the markers gets buried in snow, or moved by an animal, or just stops working. We don't know why it worked this time. Bad luck, maybe. And Sam? Tom's expression darkened. Sam was the fourth campground host we've lost at Whispering Pines since '98. Each time, same pattern. They volunteer to stay the winter. Everything's fine for a few weeks. Then they stop responding to radio checks. When we send someone to investigate, they're gone. Sometimes we find traces, like you did. Sometimes nothing at all. So why keep posting people there if you know it's dangerous? Because we can't officially close the campground without a reason that would hold up to scrutiny. Mysterious disappearances isn't enough. The Park Service has protocols, procedures. We work within them as best we can. That's bullshit, I said. People are dying. People die in the mountains all the time, Reed. You know that. Exposure, falls, animal attacks. We do what we can to minimize the risks, but we can't eliminate them entirely. This isn't exposure or falls. This is something else. Something that's been there for decades and you people know about it. Tom was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "There's a lot about these parks you don't know. Things we don't talk about in the official reports. Strange areas where compasses spin. Sections of trail where people report missing time. Places where rescue teams find bodies, but no sign of what killed them. And you just accept that. Just let it continue. What choice do we have? You saw what's up there. How do you fight something like that? How do you explain it? The second we go public, we become the crazy rangers who believe in ghosts. Nobody takes us seriously, and the incidents continue anyway." I wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong, that there had to be something we could do. But I'd seen those shapes. I'd felt their hands on me. And I knew he was right. Nobody would believe it. Hell, I'd lived through it, and I wasn't sure I believed it. "What happens now?" I asked. "You take your leave. You process what happened. And then you decide if you want to come back to the service or find another line of work. And if I talk, if I tell people what's really up there, then you'll be the ex-ranger with PTSD who had a breakdown in the mountains and started seeing things. Your choice." He stood up, preparing to leave. Then he paused. "For what it's worth, Reed, I'm sorry. Sorry we couldn't warn you. Sorry about Sam. Sorry about all of it, but you survived. Not everyone does." He left. I stayed by the window, watching the mountains until the sun set and the valleys disappeared into darkness. I took my month of leave. Spent most of it in a motel in Jackson, drinking too much and sleeping too little. The dreams came every night. Not exactly nightmares, but not normal dreams either. I'd be back at Whispering Pines, walking through the campground, and I'd hear Sam calling my name. When I'd turn around, he'd be there, but his face would be wrong. Eyes too wide, mouth opening to reveal nothing but darkness inside. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, the motel room too warm, too confining. I started keeping the lights on while I slept. Started checking the windows before bed, making sure nothing was pressed against the glass, looking in. 2 weeks into my leave, I got a package. No return address, postmarked from some tiny town in Montana I'd never heard of. Inside was a manila envelope, and inside that was a photograph. It showed Whispering Pines Campground. Winter. The 7 flashlights visible in the snow, arranged in their star pattern. But in the center of the pattern, where Sam's trailer should have been, there was something else. A figure, tall and thin, standing perfectly still. It was too far away to make out details, but I knew what it was. On the back of the photo, someone had written, "The pattern's still there, still waiting. Be careful, Reed." I burned the photograph in the motel bathroom sink and flushed the ashes, but I couldn't burn the memory of it, couldn't flush away the knowledge that it was still up there. My month ended. I didn't return to work. I called Tom and told him I was resigning. He didn't sound surprised, wished me luck, and said if I ever changed my mind, the service would take me back. I moved to Cheyenne, got a job as an EMT with the city ambulance service. Urban medicine, nothing to do with mountains or forests or winter campgrounds. Car accidents, heart attacks, overdoses. Real problems with real solutions. But I couldn't leave it behind entirely. I started researching, using the internet, old newspaper archives, whatever I could find. I looked for patterns, for other incidents like what happened at Whispering Pines. And I found them, dozens of them, hundreds maybe. National parks across the country had similar stories. Disappearances that didn't make sense. Equipment that malfunctioned in specific locations. Rangers reporting phenomena they couldn't explain. And always in winter. Always in isolated areas, always following some kind of pattern. The Whispering Pines flashlights weren't unique. They were just one version of something bigger. Something that existed in multiple places, maybe had existed for centuries. Different markers, different manifestations, but the same basic principle. Complete the pattern, and something could cross over. Something hungry. Something patient. I compiled everything into a document. Names, dates, locations, descriptions of incidents. I didn't know what to do with it. Publishing it would make me look insane, but keeping it to myself felt wrong. In the end, I encrypted it and uploaded it to a secure server. Then I sent the access codes to 3 people I trusted. Other rangers who'd had similar experiences, who'd seen things they couldn't explain. If something happened to me, they'd know where to find it. They could decide what to do with the information. 6 months after Whispering Pines, I got a call. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Harlan Reed? A man's voice, unfamiliar. Who's asking? My name's Marcus Finch. I'm a researcher with the University of Montana. I study unusual phenomena in wilderness areas. I understand you had an incident last winter at Whispering Pines. I don't talk about that. I know, but I think you should. I've documented 47 similar incidents across 6 states, always in winter, always in national parks or wilderness areas, always involving patterns or markers of some kind. I was quiet for a moment, then, how did you find me? I have contacts in the Park Service, people who know what's really out there. Your name came up. They said you survived a close encounter, said you'd seen the pattern complete. What do you want from me? Information. Details about what you saw. I'm trying to understand what these things are, how they work, maybe how to stop them. You can't stop them. I've tried researching it. They've been here longer than we have, probably longer than humanity has. Maybe, but that doesn't mean we can't learn to protect ourselves. To recognize the warning signs, to save people like Sam Porter before it's too late. Sam. Hearing his name made something twist in my chest. Sam's gone. Whatever those things did to him, he's not coming back. I know, but there are others like him. Every winter, a few more disappear. If we could understand the pattern, maybe we could break it. Or at least warn people away from the dangerous areas. I thought about it. About Sam's face on that thing in the clearing. About the voices calling for help. About those hands in the darkness, cold and strong. All right, I said finally. I'll tell you what I saw. But this stays between us. I'm not becoming some public face for this. Agreed. When can we meet? We met 3 days later at a coffee shop in Laramie. Marcus Finch was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, with the intense focus of someone obsessed with their work. He had notebooks filled with accounts similar to mine, photographs of markers in various national parks, maps with clusters of incidents marked in red. I told him everything: the flashlights, the voices, the shapes in the darkness, Sam's body in the snow, the way the pattern worked, 7 points creating something that could manifest. He listened without interrupting, taking notes occasionally. When I finished, he sat back and nodded slowly. It's consistent with the other reports. The markers are always arranged geometrically, usually 7 points, sometimes 5, occasionally 9. They're activated by winter conditions, specifically by the extreme cold and isolation, and they seem to feed on human life force, for lack of a better term. You make it sound scientific. Maybe it is. Just because we don't understand something doesn't mean it defies natural law. There might be an explanation, a mechanism we haven't discovered yet. Or maybe some things aren't meant to be understood. Maybe. But I'm not ready to accept that, not while people keep disappearing. Over the next few months, Marcus and I stayed in contact. He'd send me new cases, ask for my opinion based on my experience. I'd review them, look for similarities, try to find patterns in the patterns. It became a kind of obsession. Not healthy, probably, but it gave me purpose. Something to focus on besides the memories and the dreams. And the dreams continued, they never stopped. Every few nights, I'd be back at Whispering Pines. Sometimes I'd find Sam, sometimes I'd find my own body, frozen in the snow. Sometimes I'd find nothing at all, just those 7 lights in the darkness, waiting. It's been 2 years now since that January. I'm still in Cheyenne, still working as an EMT, still compiling information with Marcus. We've identified 33 locations across the western United States where similar patterns exist. Some are in national parks. Some are in national forests. Some are on private land that nobody visits anymore. We've tried to warn people, contacted rangers, sent anonymous tips to park superintendents. Sometimes they listen. Sometimes they don't. The campground at Whispering Pines is still open in summer. They just don't post anyone there in winter anymore. Last week, Marcus called with news. Another incident. A ranger in Olympic National Park, Washington, disappeared during a winter patrol. Search team found her 3 days later, walking in circles around a series of markers stuck in the snow. She couldn't remember the previous 3 days, couldn't explain how she survived the exposure. Same pattern? I asked. Looks like it. 9 markers this time, arranged in a circle. But the same basic principle. The cold, the isolation, the completion of the geometric pattern. Is she okay? Physically, yes. Mentally, she's having problems, nightmares, seeing things that aren't there. They put her on medical leave. Like me, I thought. Like everyone who survives these encounters. We carry it with us. The knowledge that there are places in the wilderness where the normal rules don't apply. Where something ancient and hungry waits for the right conditions to manifest. Sometimes I think about going back to Whispering Pines, taking a team, proper equipment, and trying to destroy those markers. Break the pattern permanently. But I know it wouldn't work. Tom told me they've tried before. The markers always come back. Sometimes in the same spots, sometimes in new configurations. Like the pattern itself is alive, adapting, ensuring its survival. So I do what I can. I document, I warn. I help Marcus with his research. And I try to live with what I know. The winters are the hardest. When the snow starts falling in Cheyenne, I can't help but look at it differently now. Can't help but wonder what's waiting up in those mountains, in those isolated valleys, in those places where nobody goes in January and February. Can't help but wonder if one day something from up there will find its way down here. If the patterns will expand beyond the wilderness, into the places we think are safe. I keep lights on at night. I check my windows before bed. And sometimes, when it's very cold and very quiet, I hear it. That voice calling from far away. "Help! Someone help me!" My own voice, recorded years ago, played back by something that learned to mimic human speech. Something that's still up there, still waiting, still hungry. I don't answer anymore. I just turn on more lights and wait for dawn. 3 months ago, I got another package. No return address, postmarked from Wyoming. Inside was a photograph, recent, dated from last winter. It showed Whispering Pines Campground. The 7 flashlights were gone. But in their place, arranged in the same star pattern, were 7 cairns. Stacks of stones, each about 3 feet tall, perfectly balanced despite the snow. Someone had replaced the markers, or the pattern had regenerated itself. I couldn't tell which. I called Tom immediately. He answered on the first ring, like he'd been waiting for my call. "You saw the photo," he said. It wasn't a question. "When did this happen?" "We don't know. Could have been any time between November and March. We only check that campground twice during winter closure now. Not worth the risk of more frequent patrols." "The cairns, are they the same? Do they work the same way as the flashlights?" "We don't know that either. We're not going to test it." I wanted to argue. Wanted to say we needed to understand this. Needed to document it. Needed to find a way to stop it. But I knew Tom was right. Some knowledge costs too much to acquire. "There's something else," Tom said. "The ranger from Olympic, the one Marcus told you about. She didn't make it." My stomach dropped. "What happened?" "Suicide, 3 weeks ago. Left a note saying she couldn't stand the cold anymore. Said she could feel it inside her, spreading, freezing her from the inside out." I closed my eyes. Another casualty. Another person broken by contact with whatever lived in those patterns. "Reed, I'm telling you this because I need you to understand something. What we do, the research, the documentation, it has a cost. Every time we look at this too closely, every time we try to understand it, it notices us. It starts to focus on us. The ranger from Olympic, she became obsessed. Marcus said she was calling him 3-4 times a day, talking about patterns she saw everywhere. In the clouds, in the way frost formed on her windows, in the shadows under her furniture. "You're saying we should stop. I'm saying be careful. There's a line between studying something and letting it study you. Don't cross it." After that conversation, I pulled back from the research. Stopped responding to Marcus's emails as frequently. Started focusing on my work, my actual life, instead of living in the past. But it's not that simple. You can't just decide to forget. The memories are there, burned in. And sometimes, usually in winter, usually late at night, I find myself thinking about Sam, about who he was before he found those flashlights, about the person he could have been if he'd just stayed away from that pattern. I wonder if he knew what was happening to him. If there was a moment when he realized he was being changed, replaced, consumed, or if it was gradual, so slow that he didn't notice until it was too late. I wonder if the thing that wore his face at the end retained any of his memories, any of his personality, or if it was just an empty puppet, animated by something that understood motion but not humanity. Mostly, I wonder if I brought enough of myself back, if something stayed behind in that campground, if part of me is still there, caught in the pattern, slowly freezing, because that's all any of us can do, survive the night, wait for the sun, and hope that when spring comes the patterns will go dormant again, at least until next winter, and winter always comes back. The clock stopped at 3:12 a.m. Not slowed down, not lost time gradually, just stopped. Dead. The second hand frozen between the 12 and the 1, the minute hand pointing at the 12, the hour hand at the 3. I noticed it when I came on shift that first morning. Monday, November 9th. The sun wasn't up yet, wouldn't be for another hour, and the Bridger station was cold despite the propane heater running full blast. I'm Mira Dalton, been a ranger with the Bridger-Teton National Forest for 7 years now. This was my second winter stationed at the remote outpost, a small cabin that serves as a ranger station 26 miles from the nearest paved road. The clock hung on the wall above the radio desk. Standard issue, the same white-faced institutional clock you'd find in any government building. It had been there when I arrived for my rotation, and I'd never paid it much attention. Clocks tick. They tell time. That's what they do. Except this one had stopped at 3:12 a.m. I pulled a chair over and took it down. The battery compartment was tight, like it hadn't been opened in months. I pried it loose and found a battery inside, corroded at the terminals, clearly dead. I replaced it with a fresh one from the supply cabinet, set the time to 5:47 a.m. to match my watch, and hung it back on the wall. The second hand started its sweep. Tick, tick, tick. Normal. I made coffee and settled in at the desk to review the log from the previous ranger's shift. Evelyn Cross had been on duty for the past 3 days, covering the weekend rotation. Her entries were sparse, which wasn't unusual for this time of year. Winter traffic in the backcountry was minimal. Most of the trails were snowed in, and the few hardcore winter campers who ventured out knew what they were doing. Saturday, AO 800. Begin shift. Weather clear. Temp 18 degrees TF. Saturday, 1600. Snowmobile patrol to Blackwater Ridge. No issues. Saturday, 2300. End shift. All secure. Sunday followed the same pattern. Short entries. Routine patrols. Nothing unusual. Monday, 0800. Begin shift. Replace clock battery. Weather deteriorating. Monday, 1200. Wind picking up. Expecting storm by evening. Monday, 2300. End shift. Storm arriving. Stay inside. That last entry gave me pause. Stay inside, not standard log language. Evelyn was usually precise, professional. This felt more like advice, or a warning. I looked out the window. The sky was gray, heavy with the promise of snow. The wind had already started, whistling through the gaps around the doorframe, making the whole station creak. By nightfall, we'd be in the middle of a Wyoming blizzard. I radioed into the main station in Jackson, 38 miles southwest. Bridger station to Jackson, come in. Static, then a voice. Tom Rivera, the dispatch coordinator. Jackson here. That you, Dalton? Affirmative, just checking in, starting my rotation. Looks like we've got weather coming. We're tracking it. Should hit you around 1900 hours. Forecast says 12 to 18 inches over the next 24 hours. You got supplies? Affirmative. Good for 2 weeks if needed. Copy that. Check in every 4 hours. If the radio goes out, we'll send someone when the storm clears. Copy. Bridger station out. I spent the rest of the morning doing the usual station maintenance. Checked the generator, made sure the fuel tanks were topped off, verified the propane levels, tested the emergency radio. Everything was in order. The station might be remote and old, but it was well maintained. Around noon, I made lunch. Canned soup heated on the propane stove. The wind was really howling now, and the first snowflakes were starting to fall. By 1 o'clock, visibility was down to maybe 50 yards. By 2, I couldn't see the tree line anymore. This was going to be a bad one. I settled in with a book, glancing up occasionally at the clock. It kept perfect time, 2:15, 2:30, 2:47. The second hand swept around in its endless circle. Tick, Tick. Reliable and constant. At 3:00 p.m., I radioed Jackson again. Routine check-in. Everything normal. Tom said the storm was intensifying faster than predicted. Could be 24 inches before it was done. Stay put, stay warm, stay in touch. The afternoon dragged. The storm raged outside, shaking the station, piling snow against the windows. I read, I ate dinner, I checked the equipment. I logged the weather conditions, all the mundane tasks that fill the long hours of a winter station rotation. At 11 p.m., I made my final radio check. All secure. Storm still going strong. I'd check in again at 3:00 a.m., then 7 a.m., maintaining the 4-hour schedule. I lay down on the bunk in the back room, fully clothed except for my boots. The wind was too loud for sleep, but I dozed, drifting in and out of consciousness. The station creaked and groaned. Snow hissed against the windows. The propane heater clicked on and off, maintaining temperature. At some point, I woke up completely. The room was dark. The storm was still raging. I checked my watch. 3:11 a.m. I got up, pulled on my boots, and walked into the main room to make the radio check. The clock on the wall read 3:12 a.m., and it had stopped. The second hand was frozen. The minute hand pointing at the 12, the hour hand at the 3. Exactly the same as when I'd found it that morning. I stared at it, confusion turning to unease. I'd replaced the battery myself. Fresh battery. The clock had been running perfectly all day. There was no reason for it to stop. But it had. At exactly 3:12 a.m., I pulled a chair over and took it down again. The battery was still in place, still fresh. I popped it out, tested it with the multimeter from the toolkit. Full charge. The battery was fine. I put it back in and reset the clock. 3:13 a.m. now, according to my watch. I hung it back up. The second hand started moving. Tick, tick, tick. Then I remembered the radio check. I was late. I grabbed the handset and keyed the mic. Bridger Station to Jackson, come in. Static. Bridger Station to Jackson, do you copy? More static, with something underneath it. Not quite voices, not quite noise, something in between. Jackson, this is Dalton at Bridger. Radio check, come in. The static resolved into Tom's voice, but it sounded distant, like he was calling from the bottom of a well. Elton, that you? The transmission broke up. 11 minutes late. Everything. Say again, Jackson. You're breaking up. Status? Why no check-in at... Static swallowed the rest. Storm interference, I said. All secure here. Next, check at 0700. I thought I heard Tom acknowledge, but the transmission was too garbled to be sure. I hung up the handset and looked at the clock. Still running. 3:16 a.m. I made a note in the log. EO 3:12. Clock stopped. Battery replaced. Radio check delayed due to equipment issue. All secure. I didn't mention the strange static. Storms caused interference. It was normal. Nothing unusual about it. Except it felt unusual. It felt wrong. I tried to sleep but couldn't. Just lay on the bunk, staring at the ceiling, listening to the storm and the creaking of the station and the tick of the clock in the other room. Eventually, dawn came, gray and dim through the snow-covered windows. I made coffee and wrote up my morning report. The storm was still going. 2 feet of snow already, and it wasn't done yet. The temperature had dropped to 8 degrees. Wind gusts up to 40 miles per hour. Standard winter storm stuff for Wyoming. I made my 7:00 a.m. radio check. Clear transmission this time. Tom sounded relieved to hear from me. Said he'd been worried when I was late with the 3:00 a.m. check. I told him it was just storm interference, nothing to worry about. At 8 o'clock a.m., I heard the snowmobile. Evelyn Cross coming back for the shift change. We overlapped on Tuesdays, her finishing her rotation as I started mine, a chance to hand off any important information face to face. She came through the door in a blast of wind and snow, stomping her boots, pulling off her helmet. Evelyn was in her mid-50s, built like someone who'd spent decades in the backcountry. Tough, competent, unflappable. "Hell of a storm," she said, pulling off her gloves. "Still going strong." She looked around the station, her eyes stopping on the clock. "You replaced the battery?" "Yeah, it was dead when I came on yesterday morning. Stopped at 3:12. Something flickered across her face. Not quite surprise. More like recognition. Or confirmation. "It stop again?" she asked. "What?" "The clock. Did it stop again?" I hesitated. "Yeah, last night, same time, 3:12 a.m. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. She poured herself a coffee, took a long sip, then sat down at the desk. "How long you been stationed here? This your second winter?" "Yeah, why?" "I've been coming to Bridger Station for 15 years. Different rotations, different seasons. And that clock," she nodded toward it, "has stopped at 3:12 a.m. more times than I can count." My skin prickled. "What are you talking about?" "I replaced the battery. It runs fine all day. Then that night, 3:12 a.m., it stops. Happens maybe once every few weeks, sometimes more often. Sometimes it'll go months without stopping, but when it stops, it's always 3:12. "That's impossible." "Yeah." Evelyn smiled, but there was no humor in it. "That's what I thought too. First few times I figured it was just faulty clock. Electrical issue. Coincidence. But after a while," she trailed off, staring into her coffee. "After a while what?" "After a while, you start to notice patterns." "What patterns?" Evelyn stood up and walked to the logbook, flipped back several pages. "Look at the entries. Every time that clock stops, look what happens." I looked. It took me a moment to see it, but then it clicked. On nights when Evelyn had noted replacing the clock battery, meaning it had stopped the night before, the 3 a.m. radio checks were either late or had notations about radio interference. "Could be coincidence," I said, but I didn't believe it. "Could be." Evelyn closed the logbook. "I'm heading back to Jackson. You'll be okay here?" "Yeah, of course." She pulled on her gloves, her helmet. At the door, she paused. "Mira, if it stops again tonight, make sure you're on time for that radio check. Don't be late." Why? Just don't be late. Then she was gone, the door closing behind her, the sound of her snowmobile fading into the storm. I stood there in the sudden silence looking at the clock. It read 8:23 a.m. The second hand swept around. Tick, tick. Just a clock. Just a coincidence. Old equipment in an old station. Probably some kind of electrical surge at night that affected both the clock and the radio. Rational explanation. Simple explanation. But I couldn't shake the unease that had settled into my gut like a stone. The day passed slowly. The storm finally broke around noon, leaving behind a landscape transformed. Snow drifts higher than my head against the north side of the station. The trees were buried up to their lower branches. The world was white and silent and impossibly still. I spent the afternoon digging out, cleared the door, made a path to the generator shed, checked the propane tanks, which were almost completely buried. The work kept me busy, kept my mind off the clock and Evelyn's warning and the approaching night. By evening, I was exhausted. I made dinner, logged the weather conditions, did my routine checks. At 11 o'clock p.m., I made my radio call. All secure. Clear transmission. Tom said the weather would stay clear for the next few days. Roads should be passable by Thursday. I lay down on the bunk, setting my watch alarm for 2:50 a.m., 10 minutes before the 3 o'clock a.m. radio check. 10 minutes before 3:12. I didn't expect to sleep, but I did. Hard and dreamless. When the alarm went off, I was disoriented for a moment, unsure where I was. Then it came back. The station, the storm, the clock, 2:50 a.m. I got up and walked into the main room. The clock read 2:50 a.m., exactly matching my watch. Still running, still normal. I made coffee and waited. Watched the minute hand creep towards the 12. Watched the hour hand approach the 3. At 2:59, I picked up the radio handset. At 3 o'clock a.m., I keyed the mic. "Bridger Station to Jackson, come in." "Jackson here." Tom's voice, clear and immediate. "Right on time. How's it looking out there?" "Clear, cold, checking the equipment now." I kept my eyes on the clock. 3:01 a.m., still moving. "Copy that. Next check at 0700? "Affirmative. Bridger Station out." I hung up the handset. The clock read 3:02 a.m. 3:03, 3:04. I watched it count up to 3:12. The second hand kept moving. 3:13, 3:14, 3:15. It didn't stop. I felt a rush of relief so intense it made me lightheaded. Just a coincidence. Just an old clock acting up. Nothing more. I went back to the bunk and slept until dawn. Wednesday was routine. Clear skies, brutal cold, and hours of tedious maintenance work. I checked the perimeter, verified the trail markers were still visible after the storm, cut firewood, inventoried supplies. Normal ranger work. The clock ran perfectly all day. I found myself glancing at it compulsively, watching the second hand sweep around, waiting for it to stop. It never did. That night, I made my 11 p.m. check, then set my alarm again for 2:50 a.m. I told myself I was being paranoid. The clock had run fine for over 24 hours. Whatever had caused the problem was resolved. But I set the alarm anyway. When it went off, I was already awake. I'd been lying in the dark, listening to the silence, unable to shake the feeling that something was wrong. Not specific, just wrong. 2:50 a.m. I walked into the main room. The clock read 2:50 a.m. Still running. I made my radio check at 3 o'clock. Tom acknowledged. All secure. Next check at 7 o'clock a.m. I watched the clock count up to 3:12 a.m. It stopped. The second hand froze mid-sweep. The minute hand pointing at the 12, the hour hand at the 3. Exactly the same as before. My mouth went dry. I pulled the chair over and took the clock down. The battery was still fresh, still showing full charge on the multimeter. I took it out anyway, put in a new one, reset the time. 3:14 a.m. now. I hung the clock back up. The second hand started moving. I made a note in the log, 0312. Clock stopped. Second occurrence. Battery replaced. All secure. Then I sat at the desk, staring at that entry, and something Evelyn had said came back to me. Look at the patterns. I flipped through the log, looking for every notation about the clock. There were dozens, going back months, sometimes weeks between incidents, sometimes days, but always the same. Clock stops at 3:12 a.m., battery replaced, and always on those nights something about the radio, late check-ins, interference, garbled transmissions. But there was something else, something I hadn't noticed before. On nights when the clock stopped, the log entries were shorter. Sparse, like whoever was on duty hadn't wanted to write much. Or couldn't write much. or didn't remember what there was to write about. I went back through my own entries from the past 2 days, Monday and Tuesday. Before the clock stopped, my entries were detailed. Weather conditions, maintenance tasks, patrol notes, everything documented. But my entry from early Tuesday morning, after the clock had stopped at 3:12, was just 4 words, all secure, nothing unusual, except there had been something unusual, the clock stopping, the radio interference, Evelyn's warning. Why hadn't I written about that? I looked at the clock, 3:28 a.m., still running. I picked up my pen and started writing in the log, documenting everything. The clock stopping, Evelyn's visit, the pattern I'd noticed. I wrote until my hand cramped, filling 2 full pages with details. Then I made myself coffee and sat at the desk, watching the clock, waiting for dawn. At 7:00 a.m., I made my radio check, all secure. At 8:00 a.m., I heard something that made my blood freeze, a snowmobile, coming from the direction of the main road. Evelyn wasn't due back for 5 more days. There was no reason for anyone to be out here. I grabbed my jacket and went outside. The cold hit me like a wall, but I barely noticed. I was focused on the sound of the engine getting closer, emerging from the tree line. It was Evelyn. She pulled up to the station, killed the engine, pulled off her helmet. Her face was grim. "It stopped again," she said. Not a question. "How did you know?" "Because I knew it would." She walked past me into the station, went straight to the logbook, flipped to my latest entries. She read them carefully, then looked up at me. "You wrote it all down?" "Yeah, why?" "Because most people don't. Most people, after that clock stops at 3:12, they make their log entry and it's just routine. Nothing unusual. Like they can't remember that anything happened, or don't think it's worth noting. But I remember. Yeah." Evelyn sat down heavily in the desk chair. "That's good. That means you're paying attention. That means you might actually be able to help me figure this out." "Figure what out?" "What happens at 3:12?" She pulled out a folder from her pack. Inside were photocopies of logbook pages, dozens of them, all from Bridger Station, all going back years. "I've been collecting these," Evelyn said. "Every time I do a rotation here, I photocopy the logs. Been doing it for 5 years now. And look." She spread them out on the desk. I could see the pattern immediately. Entries about the clock stopping. Always at 3:12 a.m., always with brief dismissive log notes afterward. But there was something else. Every few months there would be a longer entry, detailed, questioning, like someone had noticed the pattern and written it down. But those detailed entries never continued. The next rotation, whoever was on duty went back to the brief, dismissive notes. "They forget," Evelyn said quietly. "Or they convince themselves it's nothing, or something makes them stop paying attention. But the clock keeps stopping, and something keeps happening at 3:12 a.m. and nobody remembers." "What do you think happens?" Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached into her pack and pulled out something that made my stomach drop. A radio log, not from Bridger Station, from Jackson. "I got this from Tom," she said. "He doesn't know I have it. I told him I needed it for a requisition audit, but look at the entries." She pointed to specific times. 3:00 a.m. radio checks from Bridger Station. Dozens of them. Months of them. Most were marked as received and logged normally, but scattered throughout, maybe once or twice a month, were entries marked differently. 3:12 a.m. Bridger check received. 11 minutes late. Static interference. "We're always late," I said slowly. "When the clock stops, the radio check comes in at 3:12 instead of 3. "Yeah, but here's the thing." Evelyn pulled out another page. Look at these entries. Same nights, same timestamps. They were incident reports, minor things. A hiker reporting strange lights in the backcountry. A camper calling in about hearing voices on the trails when no one else was around. A ranger on patrol reporting equipment malfunctions and lost time. All of them logged at times corresponding to nights when the Bridger station clock had stopped at 3:12 a.m. What does it mean? I asked. I don't know, but I think something happens in this forest at 3:12 a.m. Something that affects the station, the radios, the people on duty, and I think that clock is somehow connected to it. That's impossible. Yeah, that's what everyone says, right before they stop paying attention. Evelyn stood up and walked to the clock, staring up at it. Tonight's Thursday. I'm going to stay. We're both going to be awake at 3:12 a.m., and we're going to pay attention. We're going to document everything. And maybe, finally, we'll figure out what the hell is going on. I wanted to argue. Wanted to tell her she was being paranoid, seeing patterns where there were none. But I couldn't. Because I'd seen it too. Felt it too. That wrongness that settled over the station in the dead of night. Okay, I said. We'll stay awake. We'll watch. Evelyn nodded. And whatever happens, we write it down. Everything, no matter how strange it seems, no matter how much we want to dismiss it. We write it down. The day crawled past. Evelyn and I took turns napping, making sure one of us was always awake. We went through the logs again, looking for more patterns, more clues. We found them. Notes about equipment malfunctions, unexplained noises, the sensation of time moving differently, all associated with nights when the clock stopped at 3:12 a.m. At 10 p.m. we made coffee, strong coffee. We were going to need it. At 11 p.m. I made my routine radio check. Tom asked if everything was okay. I told him yes. Didn't mention that Evelyn was still here. Didn't mention what we were planning to do. At midnight, we started our watch. Both of us sitting at the desk, the logbook open, pens ready. The clock read 12:01 a.m., ticking steadily. The hours crawled by. 12:30. 1:30. We didn't talk much. Just watched, waited. At 2 a.m., I made fresh coffee. My hands were shaking slightly. Nerves or exhaustion, I couldn't tell. At 2:30 a.m., Evelyn checked all the equipment. Radio working. Generator running. Everything normal. At 2:50 a.m., we both sat down at the desk, our eyes on the clock. 2:55 a.m. 2:58 a.m. 2:59 a.m. At 3 a.m., I made my radio check. Bridger Station to Jackson, come in. Static, heavy static. Much worse than normal. Bridger Station to Jackson, do you copy? More static. Then Tom's voice, distant and distorted. Deeger? The transmission cut out completely. Jackson, this is Dalton. Radio check, do you copy? Nothing. Just static with that strange undertone. Almost like voices. Almost like music. Something wrong about it. I looked at Evelyn. She was staring at the clock, her face pale. 3:02 a.m., 3:05 a.m., 3:08 a.m. The second hand seemed to be slowing down. Not much. Just slightly, but enough to notice. 3:10 a.m., 3:11 a.m. The temperature in the station dropped. Suddenly, dramatically. I could see my breath. Evelyn's too. Mira, she whispered. Look. The windows, all of them. Frost was spreading across the glass from the outside, creating intricate patterns. Beautiful and wrong. The frost was spreading upward, defying gravity, crawling toward the top of each window. 3:12 a.m. The clock stopped, and everything went silent. Not just quiet, silent. The kind of silence that presses against your eardrums that makes you realize how much background noise you never notice until it's gone. The generator stopped humming. The wind stopped blowing. Even the crackle of the radio static cut off. Complete, absolute silence. Evelyn grabbed my arm, her grip tight. She was staring at something behind me. I turned around. The door was open. Not blown open by wind. Not creaking open slowly. Just open. Standing wide, showing the darkness outside. We hadn't heard it open, hadn't heard anything. And in that doorway, barely visible in the dim light from the station, was something that shouldn't be there. A figure. Tall, thin, standing absolutely still, just standing there, watching us. "Close the door," Evelyn whispered. "Close it now." I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The figure in the doorway wasn't moving either. Just standing, watching. Then from outside, I heard it. Footsteps, crunching in the snow. Multiple sets, coming from all directions, surrounding the station. The figure in the doorway tilted its head. The movement was wrong. Too fluid, too angular, not human. "Close the door!" Evelyn shouted, breaking the spell. I lunged forward and grabbed the door handle. The figure didn't move, didn't try to stop me, just watched as I slammed the door shut and threw the bolt. The instant the door closed, sound returned. The generator hummed. The wind howled. The radio crackled back to life with Tom's voice. "Copy? Bridger Station, do you copy? You're 12 minutes late on your check. Respond, please." I grabbed the handset. "Jackson, this is Bridger. We copy. Sorry for the delay. Equipment issues. All secure." "Copy that, Bridger. You had us worried. Everything okay up there?" "Affirmative, all secure." I hung up and looked at the clock. 3:13 a.m. The second hand was moving again. Tick, tick, tick. Evelyn and I stared at each other, both of us breathing hard. She looked how I felt, terrified, but also relieved. Whatever had just happened, it was over. "Did you see?" I started. "Yeah. What was? I don't know." We sat in silence for a moment. Then Evelyn grabbed the logbook and started writing. Her hand was shaking, but her writing was steady, precise. She documented everything. The clock stopping, the temperature drop, the frost on the windows, the open door, the figure, the footsteps. When she finished, she pushed the logbook toward me. "Your turn. Write exactly what you saw. Don't leave anything out." I wrote. Every detail, every sensation. When I finished, we had 4 full pages of documentation, the most detailed log entry Bridger Station had probably ever seen. "Now what?" I asked. Evelyn stood up and walked to the window, looking out into the darkness. The frost patterns had already started to melt, water running down the glass. Now we wait for next time, and we document it again. And we keep documenting until we have enough evidence that someone has to take this seriously. What if they don't? Then we keep watching anyway, because something is happening at 3:12 a.m. in this forest. Something that affects this station, and if we don't figure out what it is, nobody will. She looked back at the clock. That thing is connected to it somehow. It's not just a broken clock, it's marking something, warning us, or maybe calling to something, I don't know which. Evelyn left at dawn on Friday, taking copies of our documentation with her. She said she was going to compare our account with other reports, look for more patterns. She told me to keep watching, keep documenting, and to call her immediately if anything else happened. I spent Friday in a fog of exhaustion and adrenaline. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow seemed wrong. I couldn't stop thinking about that figure in the doorway, the way it had stood there, watching, the wrongness of it. But more than that, I couldn't stop thinking about the footsteps, multiple sets, surrounding the station. What were they? Who were they? And why did they only appear when the clock stopped at 3:12 a.m.? That night, I didn't sleep. Couldn't sleep. I sat at the desk with the logbook open, a pen in my hand, my eyes fixed on the clock. Watching. Waiting. At 2:50 a.m., I made fresh coffee. My fourth pot of the night. The caffeine wasn't even affecting me anymore. I was beyond tired, running on pure nervous energy. At 3:00 a.m., I made my radio check. Clear transmission. Tom sounded half asleep but acknowledged normally. I watched the clock count up to 3:12 a.m. It kept running. 3:13, 3:40, 3:15. No stop, no temperature drop, no frost, nothing. I felt a mixture of relief and disappointment. Part of me had wanted it to happen again, wanted more evidence, wanted answers, but mostly I was just relieved. Saturday passed without incident. Sunday too. The clock ran perfectly, the station felt normal. I started to convince myself that Thursday night had been an anomaly, a one-time event. Maybe the full moon, or solar flares, or some other natural phenomenon that wouldn't repeat for months or years. But I kept watching the clock, kept setting my alarm for 2:50 a.m., kept making notes in the log. Monday night, 3:12 a.m. The clock kept running. Tuesday night, 3:12 a.m., still running. Wednesday night, 3:12 a.m., running. A week passed, then two. The clock never stopped. Nothing unusual happened. I called Evelyn on the satellite phone. Told her everything had been quiet. She said the same. She'd been going through old records, talking to retired rangers, trying to find more information about Bridger Station and the clock. She'd found some interesting things. Stories about strange occurrences in the area. Native American legends about the forest being a thin place, where the boundary between worlds was permeable. But nothing concrete. Nothing that explained what we'd experienced. "Keep watching," she told me. "It'll happen again. These things run in cycles." She was right. 3 weeks after the incident, on a Wednesday night in early December, I was doing my routine check at 3:00 a.m. when the radio started acting up. Heavy static. Interference. Tom's voice was barely audible through the noise. My skin prickled. I looked at the clock. 3:02 a.m. I watched the second hand slow down. 3:10, 3:11. At 3:12 it stopped. The silence crashed down like a weight. The temperature plummeted. Frost crawled across the windows. And this time, I was ready. I had my phone out, recording video. I had the logbook open, ready to write. I was watching everything, documenting everything. The door remained closed. I'd locked it at sunset. Something I'd started doing religiously since the last incident. The bolt was thrown. The door was secure. But I heard them anyway, the footsteps, surrounding the station. Dozens of them, maybe more, walking in circles around the building, crunching in the snow. I moved to the window, careful not to get too close, and looked out. The forest was full of them. Figures. Tall, thin, standing among the trees. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all perfectly still, all facing the station. My hands shook as I tried to keep the phone steady, recording through the window. The figures didn't move, just stood there, watching. Then one of them took a step forward, then another. They were approaching the station. Slowly, deliberately, moving in perfect synchronization. I backed away from the window, my heart hammering. They were getting closer. I could see more details now in the dim light. They were humanoid but wrong. Too tall, limbs too long, movements too fluid. The footsteps surrounded the station now. Right outside, circling. I could hear them clearly through the walls. Then they stopped. Silence again. Complete. Absolute. I held my breath, waiting. A knock on the door, 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I didn't move, didn't breathe. 3 more knocks, louder this time. I looked at the clock, still stopped at 3:12. The knocking continued, 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. Pause. Patient. Persistent. I grabbed the radio handset, tried to call Jackson. Nothing. Just dead air. The radio was completely offline. The knocking stopped. I waited in the silence, every muscle tensed, ready to run or fight or whatever I'd need to do. Then I heard it. A voice. From outside the door. My voice. Bridger Station to Jackson, come in. My exact voice. My inflection. My words from the 3:00 a.m. radio check. Then another voice. Tom's voice from Jackson. Jackson here. Everything okay up there? Affirmative, all secure. My voice again. The exact exchange from 20 minutes ago. Being played back, or replayed, or remembered by something outside that door. The voices stopped, more silence. Then the doorknob turned. Slowly. Testing. Finding it locked. I watched the knob twist back and forth, whoever or whatever was outside trying the door. The bolt held. The door didn't open. The knob stopped turning. I heard footsteps moving away, then more footsteps, all of them moving away from the station, receding into the forest. The temperature rose. The frost on the windows began to melt. The radio crackled back to life. I looked at the clock, 3:13 a.m. The second hand started moving again. I grabbed the handset immediately. Bridger Station to Jackson, urgent. Come in. Jackson here. Tom's voice, concerned. Dalton, you're 13 minutes late. We were about to send. I need to report an incident, I interrupted. Multiple individuals surrounding the station. Attempted entry. Need backup immediately. Silence on the other end. Then, say again, Bridger. You're saying someone tried to break in? Affirmative. Multiple individuals. Surrounding the station. Just left. I'm okay, but I need backup. Copy that. Stay inside. Lock everything. We're sending a unit. ETA 90 minutes. Copy. Bridger out. I hung up and immediately started writing in the log. Everything, every detail. The figures in the forest, the footsteps, the knocking, the voices. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely write, but I forced myself to document it all. When I finished, I looked at the video on my phone. My stomach dropped. The video showed me moving to the window, showed me backing away, showed me at the desk, writing in the log. But when I played back the section where I'd pointed the camera out the window, where I'd recorded the figures in the forest, there was nothing, just trees, just snow, just darkness. The figures didn't show up on video, like they weren't really there, or like they existed in a way that cameras couldn't capture. I played it back 3 times, my hands shaking worse with each viewing. I knew what I'd seen. I knew they'd been there. But the video showed nothing. 2 rangers arrived from Jackson just before dawn. They searched the perimeter of the station, found nothing. No footprints in the snow except mine from days earlier. No signs of anyone approaching the building. No evidence of attempted entry. They asked me questions. What had I seen? How many people? What did they look like? What time did it happen? I told them the truth, all of it. The clock stopping, the figures, the voices, the knocking. They exchanged glances, the kind of glances that meant they thought I was losing it. Cabin fever, isolation, the stress of the job. One of them checked the log, read my entry, read Evelyn's entries from weeks before. He closed the book and looked at me with something like pity. "The clock stops," he said gently. "Old equipment. It's been doing that for years. I know that, but... And you've been alone up here for almost a month. That's a long time. The isolation can play tricks on you, make you see things that aren't there. I know what I saw. I'm sure you do. But look." He pointed to the windows. No frost patterns. The temperature's normal, nothing on the video, no tracks outside. Whatever you think you experienced, there's no physical evidence. But there was evidence. The log entries. The radio logs from Jackson showing late check-ins. The pattern that went back years. I tried to explain, tried to show them. But I could see them shutting down, dismissing it, the same way everyone else had dismissed it. "You should take some time off," the other ranger said. "Get back to Jackson, see people. You've been up here too long." They left an hour later. Told me to radio if I had any more problems. Said they'd check in with me daily for the next week. I sat alone in the station, looking at the clock. 8:47 a.m., running perfectly. I called Evelyn on the satellite phone, told her everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then, "They didn't believe you. No, they never do. That's why it keeps happening. Because everyone who experiences it either convinces themselves it didn't happen or gets dismissed when they report it. The pattern continues because nobody takes it seriously. So, what do? We keep documenting. We keep watching. And we find someone who will listen. There has to be someone, a researcher, a scientist, someone who studies this kind of thing." "What kind of thing? What are they, Evelyn? Those figures, what are they?" She was quiet again. Then, "I think they're what the Lakota were talking about. The thin places, where boundaries break down. This forest has always been one of those places, and that station, for some reason, is at the center of it. Maybe because of where it's located, maybe because of something in the ground. I don't know. But at 3:12 a.m. something happens. The boundary gets thinner, and they come through. Come through from where? I don't know. Somewhere else. Somewhere that's not here. And that clock somehow marks it. It's not just broken, it's connected to the phenomenon. Maybe it's affected by whatever causes the boundary to thin. Maybe it's part of the mechanism. But it stops at 3:12 because that's when they come through." It sounded insane, but it was the only explanation that fit the evidence. "What do they want?" I asked. "I don't know. Maybe they're just curious. Maybe they're drawn here, or maybe..." She trailed off. "Maybe what?" "Maybe they want to come all the way through, and they're testing, trying the doors, knocking, seeing if they can cross over." The thought made my blood run cold. "And the clock? Is their signal, or their schedule, or their way of marking when the boundary is thinnest. Whatever it is, it stops at 3:12 for a reason, and we need to figure out what that reason is." I stayed at Bridger Station for 2 more weeks. The clock stopped 3 more times. Each time, I documented everything. Each time they came. The figures, the footsteps, the knocking. Each time they got a little bolder. On the last night, they didn't just knock. They tried to open the windows. I could hear them pressing against the glass, testing it. The frost pattern spread faster, thicker, like they were bringing the cold with them from wherever they came from. And the voices got clearer, not just replaying my words, but trying to form new ones, calling my name, asking me to open the door, promising things I couldn't quite understand through the distortion. I didn't open the door, didn't open the windows. Stayed inside until 3:13 a.m. when the clock started again and they left. But I knew it was only a matter of time before they figured out how to get in. Or before someone at the station, someone who didn't know about them, opened the door at 3:12 a.m. I submitted my transfer request the next morning. Said I needed a change of scenery. Different challenges. They approved it immediately. Probably happy to move someone who'd been filing disturbing incident reports about non-existent intruders. I left Bridger Station on January 4th. Someone else took over my rotation. I don't know his name. Never met him. But I checked the logs. Evelyn still sends me copies. The new ranger doesn't mention the clock. Doesn't document anything unusual. His entries are brief, routine, normal, just like everyone else's before I started paying attention. The clock still stops at 3:12 a.m. The radio checks are still late. The pattern continues. And somewhere in the Bridger Teton National Forest, in a small station 26 miles from the nearest paved road, the boundary between our world and somewhere else grows thin every night. And they wait on the other side, testing, trying, getting closer to crossing over completely. I'm stationed in Yellowstone now, different forest, different station. Safe, I tell myself. But last week, I noticed something. The clock in my new station. Standard issue. White face, black hands. Last Tuesday night at 3:12 a.m., I woke up to use the bathroom. The clock had stopped. And outside in the distance, I heard footsteps in the snow.